Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Your hosts are Joseph and Madison Whalen, a father and daughter team making their way through the challenges of the teenage years.
Welcome to Insights into Teens. This is episode 191, Land of the Rising Sun. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my adventurous and worldly co-host, Madison Whalen.
Hi, everyone.
So how you doing today, Maddie?
I'm doing all right. Little tired, but I'm all right.
Little tired, still suffering from jet lag?
I don't think anymore, just tired because I'm actually doing stuff now.
Okay, all right. I know you had a rough time with the jet lag, and we're going to get into all of that today. On today's episode, we're going to recap your, was it 10 days in Japan?
Kind of, technically.
10 days in Japan and 3 days in the air.
More 8 days, technically.
Okay. We do have the agenda. We're going to run through that. We're going to have you tell us what it was like, how interesting it was. And yeah, that's what today's podcast is going to be about, because I think a lot of other kids out there would appreciate it from the perspective of a teenager. Before we do that, though, I do want to invite the listening and viewing. I was going to say subscribers, but I'm asking you to subscribe. So if I'm asking you to subscribe, you're not a subscriber yet. So our listening audience and our viewing audience, you can find us listed as Insights into Things for all of our podcasts, both video and audio. You can also find us listed as Insights into Teens, just our audio podcasts, and they're available on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast. I would also invite you to write in, contact us. We do have a call-in number now, so no one's actually answering the phones, but you can leave a voicemail on the message itself, and we'll get you on a future podcast with your comments. You can call in to 856-403-8788, or you can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can find us on Twitter, or X as it is now, at insights_things, or you can find links to all those and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. Are we ready?
Sure.
Here we go. So before we get into all the fun stuff you did on the trip, we kind of have to talk about the transit, the plane ride there. So you had 2 flights over. You had 1 flight from Jersey to San Francisco.
Well, more Philly to San Francisco.
Well, yeah, Philly to San Francisco, coast to coast you went.
Yep.
You had a little layover there. And then from there, you jumped across the Pacific all the way over to Japan. How long did it take you total getting there?
Well, it took about 5 hours from Philly to San Fran, and then around 11-ish hours, a little more, a little less. I still don't entirely remember. They technically gave us how long it was, but about 16 hours, I'd say, overall.
For just to get there?
Yes.
Now, the other interesting thing, and something that I was struggling with the entire time you were there, was not only the time difference, but you crossed the international date line. So you were in the future for us. You were 13 hours in the future for us, right?
Yep.
And I just could not wrap my head around that. How did that affect you when you got there, being literally 13 hours off your regular clock?
Well, the jet lag was probably a cause of that, because like when I ended up getting off like the international flight, I felt like I was gonna puke. I needed the bathroom. I wanted to eat. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse all at the same time.
Sounds like you really had a good time on that trip then, huh?
Well, when we ended up landing that day, and of course, at that point, it was like 2 p.m. that day, and we had something to do, and I'm like, can we please just head back to a hotel? I don't feel good. But by the time we actually got to the thing, we had like an hour-long bus ride, so I was able to kind of calm down.
That helps. So this trip wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing, obviously. This is something that had been in the works for several years now. What did you do prior to the trip to kind of prepare you for the journey or to get you ready to immerse yourself in culture in Japan?
Well, for one, I started using Duolingo and, got to the point of understanding that, it really wanted you to continue your streak because it held your family hostage.
Yeah, it does. It does tend to do that, doesn't it? It's very insistent.
So I'd been using that at one point to, learn Japanese to maybe make communication a little easier. We ended up getting a suitcase specifically for because like they didn't want us to have to check our luggage because it wasn't going to be it was going to take longer
because of the layover
and connecting flights and so forth. So they ended up wanting us to basically have a carry-on bag. So we had to pack like 9 days worth of clothes and anything else into like a pretty decently small suitcase. And we had to basically have that and also possibly have room for souvenirs. And like a bunch of people ended up just buying another suitcase and checking their luggage when we ended up leaving.
That's funny. So what did you do on the flight? Were there movies? Did you have books? Did you have any kind of activity or games or anything? Because that's a long flight.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you're like me. You didn't sleep on the flight.
Pretty much, yes. So you had the 5-hour one, which I technically fell asleep during 1 hour of it, but I really wouldn't say I was sleeping. It did not feel like I was sleeping at all. I more so just lost consciousness at that point. I didn't feel rested afterwards. They didn't have really anything, but I ended up getting books from like Five Below that were like puzzle books that I could, write in and keep myself occupied. It was honestly it was kind of a boring flight, and like it wasn't a very fun one, I will admit. But then on the international flight, we had like actual TV screens. They gave us headphones, and you were able to watch movies, watch TV shows.
San Fran to Japan.
Yes, you were able to watch movies, watch television, and there were even like games on there. There was even actually a mode that I kind of liked, and it was basically like a sort of work focused but also like sleep mode kind of thing, where like you would just play like calming music in the background. So if like you needed to work on something, you had that, or if you wanted to sleep but needed noise to block out every other noise out there because there's no way you can sleep on an airplane, you could do that. And as I alluded to, I did not get any sleep because anytime I would try to go to sleep, something else happened. Like I tried to go to sleep at one point and someone else's light went on. When the light went off, someone was snoring. When the person stopped snoring, a child would be screaming. And when a child wasn't screaming, a child was just talking loudly to its parent.
At least they all took turns, right?
Yeah, which, that kind of made it a little agonizing. And that's kind of why on the returning flight, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to bed. I don't care. I'm not going to sleep.
So I arranged the show notes based on the itinerary that you had. So if I have something out of order or something like that, just let me know and we'll kind of speak around it.
Of course.
So your first day, you were in Osaka.
Yep.
What were your first impressions of Osaka? What stood out to you that you saw?
Okay, well, we ended up taking the airport was actually kind of interesting looking because at one point after we went through, because of course, it's strange to see like all the signs not in English and instead in Japanese because, that's the country you're in. But like it's still kind of weird to see. There was also like a lot of like cartoon characters that like were part of like the signs and symbols and so forth. And then at one point when we were like in a station where we were going to get to the bus, it did not at all look like an airport. It looked more like a mall because like it was colored certain ways. It was very bright, and I also saw some interesting elevators which I hadn't seen before. And when we were on the hour-long bus ride, we ended up seeing like some of the shorelines. A lot of the buildings were very interesting because some of them, like the architecture was modern, but not modern as in the United States. Like they were built in kind of interesting blocky ways, and then some of them looked more traditionally Japanese as well.
Okay. Interesting. So you guys did do, or you were supposed to do, a walking tour of Downton Canal Street. Is that where you guys ate? And how was that experience for you?
Oh boy. So yeah, we actually did see like the canal, and they actually had like boats going across. So that was kind of neat because we were like stationed on the bridge at one point, and we ended up having like a 5-minute walk down the street. And it was kind of nerve wracking because like a lot of like the stores and so forth were like very loud because like there were like 3 instances of I think the same store where there was this animatronic crab, and it was like gigantic at the front.
Terrifying.
And yeah, and its legs would move and its arms moved up and down. It was really weird. And its eyes would also like bob up and down as well, which was very interesting. And obviously the rest of it, like there were a lot of signs. There were a lot of street vendors out there where you could get food and so forth. And basically after we like walked down the entire the street and we were told where certain like food options were, we were given a couple hours to basically go and find your own dinner. And then we were going to meet back at the place where the bus was so that we could get on the bus to go to the hotel.
So how did finding food work out?
Initially I wasn't really able to do that because I ended up kind of having a panic attack, cause, I'm not great with people, like in general, and, I was also in a foreign country, a place I'd never been before, which I don't have great experience with that either. If I'm not at a place, I get like very antsy if I haven't been there before. So it's like I'm always kind of like looking around like, where am I? And the prospect of actually going and talking to people to get food, I can barely do that in the United States. But there was an extra layer to it because in Japan, most people don't speak English. It's not really a primary language. So there was obviously going to be a language barrier there, and I was kind of freaking out. And at one point when me and my one friend, she was getting this thing called melon bread, which I did end up having at one point, but when she was getting that and I was in line behind her, at some point I just freaked out. I was getting scared. People were like walking, and like the thing is, in Japan, they also don't really, like, personal space isn't really a thing, because like they'll just walk past you with like the smallest gap in between you and somebody else, which I had to learn to adapt to. But like I ended up like pushing myself against a wall, and I was kind of like crying at that point and freaking out. Thankfully, one of the moms and her daughter ended up like finding me and basically helped to coax me and so forth. My one friend ended up getting me one of the melon breads with ice cream. It was pretty good. I do recommend it. And then I ended up getting the confidence to buy a tempura crab leg, which is basically just a crab leg but fried.
Okay.
Deep fried, rather.
So you did get to experience some of the street food there, some of the terrifying experiences on the street there.
Yeah. But one thing of note is that there was a stand called Kobe beef, and it's basically just beef on a stick and so forth. I would not really recommend getting that because when someone ended up charging it to their debit card, it came out to be like $75.
Well, because Kobe beef is a delicacy in Japan. It's like the finest grade of beef that you can get.
Yeah, so it cost them like $75 US for it. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend that.
That would be like going to a restaurant here and ordering like a 15-ounce filet mignon. So that's understandable. So the next leg had you going from Osaka to Kyoto, but you stopped in Nara, Japan for a couple of shrines. Tell us how that was. I know you guys did a lot of shrines while you were there. You had Shinto, you had Buddhist. What was the experience like? Did you feel connected to the culture at that point? Was there a historical thing that was interesting? What can you say about that?
Okay, so we visited 2 shrines in Nara, one that was Shinto and another that was Buddhist. The Shinto one was the one that had like the most lanterns in it. It like had 100 or something lanterns. And I did like find it interesting how connected it was to nature, and because like in Nara they hold deer sacred. So both the Buddhist temple we went to, where we ended up seeing like the Nara Great Buddha. So the Buddha and the Shinto shrine we went to, they were both connected to something called Deer Park, which we also ended up going to because the deer were sacred in Nara. So the shrine was very calming and beautiful. They had like a prayer area. There was also we had a tour guide as well, and there were torii gates that were basically these like large orange gates, and that basically marked if you were at a shrine, and you'd like bow in front of them before you walk in, and then when you left, you would turn around and bow, and then you would leave. You'd also wash your hands a certain way, as well as your mouth, as a form of purification, because water is seen in the Japanese culture as a form of purification. So we did that, and then when we were at the Buddhist temple, we actually learned the history of like this gigantic grand building and how it used to like be much bigger, but like fires and like various things would end up destroying most of it, but it would be rebuilt, and there was actually like history inside of it where like you could see like they had like different models of it.
Oh, okay, cool. So you see the different versions of the temple.
Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like it was kind of cool. It wasn't overly stressful then.
Well,
okay, maybe it was.
Well, that wasn't what stressed me out. It was more so the fact that at that point, my legs, like, I don't walk often, so my legs were really starting to hurt. It was also pretty hot for me, and it also started raining. And at that point, I was also hungry and tired. So at one point, when we were leaving the Buddhist temple to go to the deer park, I ended up breaking down.
Okay. All right. I'm glad you kept score.
I keep score of all my breakdowns because, not really the most normal thing to be happening, as I didn't see anyone else that had breakdowns like I did.
You were very out of your element. I give you a lot of credit for how brave you were in stepping so far out of your element.
Thank you.
So you move on from Nara to Kyoto. And in Kyoto, you saw the famous Temple of 1,000 Gates.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so
that seems excessive to me.
I mean, yeah. It was honestly very interesting because there was a lot of culture with that, because we also learned about how the fox is seen as a lucky symbol, and there were a lot of like different fox statues, as they were kind of seen as like the messengers of the gods. So we learned why like the fox was a lucky animal, because the thing is, the fox eats the mice that eat the rice, because rice is obviously grown in Japan, and it's seen as as their most valuable crop. So anything that kills the mice is seen as a lucky animal. So cats and foxes tend to be those lucky animals. So there's like these masks that are made that are meant to, embody the animals.
Interesting. That's a very practical approach to how they determine what animals are lucky and not. Some places, and I guess a lot of cultures are like that. Like Indian culture reveres cows, and I guess the cows play a major role in life there. But, the fact that they're revering animals that protect their food source makes a lot of sense. How did you find the gate? So you didn't walk all the gates, right?
Yeah, we ended up like walking under some, and then there was a pathway with smaller gates that were actually donated to the area, and then there was like this one-off area that had a couple significant like religious shrines and so forth. There's actually this interesting ritual I want to bring up where basically you would put in a coin and you'd make your wish in your head, and there was this rock. So if you lift the rock and it's heavier than you think, your wish won't come true for a while. But if you lift it and it's lighter than you think, your wish is going to basically come true instantly.
Almost sounds like Punxsutawney Phil and the groundhog,
Kind of, but I honestly thought it was interesting. And they also mentioned how there are tour gates that you buy in the one shop area, and people actually bring it up the gates up to the mountain to basically leave it there for the Shinto god. And I did end up looking down all the gates, and not only are the gates like in a line, but there's also like steps to where you go up. And I have heard that of people that do that, but I think it takes like 3 hours to get up them all. It was very impressive to see. I didn't do it because I'm not good with stairs and heights and so forth, but it was very impressive to see, and it was very interesting how like there were different like obviously how we have here Punxsutawney Phil for Groundhog's Day. They have, the stone rocks for their wishes, and they had other things that were meant to be wishes. Like there were these wooden tablets that you would buy at them. You'd write down your wish and you'd leave it on like these boards.
Okay. So having visited the various shrines and having your first taste of Japan there, how would you describe the cultural importance that the shrines and religion play in the lives of day-to-day people in Japan?
I feel like after seeing all the shrines, wishing and praying is like a major aspect of the culture for Japan, as well as the symbols like the fox and the cat, and I learned more about like how each of those symbols were lucky in their own ways. And the whole like wish making, because like the thing is there's like many gods in Japan. There's like matchmaking gods, there's gods of nature, there's gods of the mountains, and each of them hold various significances. And basically, like especially with Shinto, you basically don't have to believe in it fully, or at the very least you can have most of your beliefs held in one religion, but you could still go to like Shinto shrines and pray there, and the god will still like hear you and grant you your wish or your prayer. And a lot of them also don't depict their gods either. It's just like you have a general shrine area. You don't see what the god looks like, but you still, offer up your prayers and wishes.
Interesting. It sounds like it's a very passive way of going about religion, unlike some of the more Western style religions out there. It actually sounds kind of inviting.
And I did actually see like there were other like, it wasn't like just Buddhism or Shintoism. There was also like, I did actually see like a Catholic church in Japan as well, a couple of other churches and stuff like that. So there are like obviously other religions there, and it was definitely interesting to see how all of it kind of played into not only the cultural history of Japan, but also the architectural history and just the traditions of Japan.
Fascinating. Well, I think we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to pick it up in Kyoto on day 4 and move on from there. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of your favorite gaming podcast finishing with a play?
Oh, no!
Well, check out No Credits Rolled, where we play the games but rarely finish them. How's it going, folks? I'm Sam Whalen, your friendly host at No Credits Rolled, the ultimate gaming podcast, where we dish out the latest scoops and reviews on all your beloved video games.
Hey, listen!
Not only that, but we spice things up with some guest interviews and even give you, yes, you, a chance to have your say. Tune in every other week for a fresh dose of No Credits Rolled, Available on all major podcast platforms, and hit us up on social media at No Credits Rolled. So why wait? Let's dive into the gaming world together, where finishing games is optional, but the fun is guaranteed.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. We are talking about a recent trip to Japan that you took. So you were in Kyoto for 2 days?
Yes.
You went to the bamboo forest. So tell us about the bamboo. What do they have in the bamboo forest?
Well, you could take as many guesses as you want, but I'm assuming you'd get it on the first try. Bamboo, pretty much. And like there was one spot where like you could go deeper into the forest, and but like we ended up kind of stopping there. I didn't go into it because at that point we had already seen a bunch of bamboo. It was very pretty and it got me to appreciate nature, but it was really like, like, at that point, I didn't really see too much of a point in going forward because there was also, like, a whole other town where we were expected to get lunch at, which by that point and all the panic attacks I had, I was like, you know what, just take me to the bus, please. The bus was still there, so it's like, can I just stay at the bus? So our tour guide, Keiko, was thankfully kind enough to escort me back to the bus because it was genuinely a really long walk and my feet were already hurting, and I'm like, yeah, I can't, because like that was the busiest street we've seen. Like there was no space between anybody, and like I had to be very careful to make sure I was still following her because the crowds were just insane, and I'm like, yeah, if I try to navigate this through myself, I'm going to panic again. Which, you know, at least I knew my limits.
That's true. So while you were there, you also visited and I'm going to hopefully not pronounce this too bad, the Nijo Castle?
Yes.
Tell us about that and the Golden Pavilion.
Okay, so the Nijo Castle was actually the first thing we did that day, and it was very interesting because obviously I have a more like kind of Western and European style of thinking of what a castle looks like. Looks nothing like that. It had purely white walls. It had a moat, which was kind of the only like resemblance to it, but it still looked like a traditional Japanese architecture. We actually went inside
and it's like a pagoda style architecture with the vaulted roofs and curved roofs and stuff, right?
Yeah, and it also had like very nice looking trees around the border. And when we actually got in the castle, there was no photography and we actually had to take our shoes off. So we ended up walking around. They had like dioramas that like, it was basically like a show. It was kind of like the place where a shogun would be, who in Japanese history, the shogun used to be like an influential political figure that like had samurai that would protect him, and I think was like a head. It was basically a head samurai and so forth. So we ended up like seeing all the different rooms, all the different waiting rooms for if you wanted to see the shogun. We saw replicas of samurai and the shogun himself. It was very interesting. And then outside the one gift shop that everyone went to, I had another panic attack and had to go outside. Thankfully, the one nurse that was on the trip ended up kind of taking me away because it was very crowded in there and I could barely make sense of anything.
Okay, well, I don't think we need to keep score of the panic attacks anymore.
I understand that.
So at the castle, like here, when you visit a historic site in the U.S. and even in Europe, you often encounter people that are reenactors, docents that are in there trying to explain the different things. Did they have anything like that there in the tour where they had someone doing explanations of what the different things of the castle were? Anybody in costume or anything like that?
Well, we did have a tour guide that I guess kind of specialized in it, and he basically like talked about the sort of stuff. And the interesting thing is that like you can actually there's actually like still various traps in there that are like if anyone was going to break in, there'd be like different traps and so forth. And like I guess there's a way that you can tell that there's like some sort of trap in there, and he actually like asked us to be like, be on the lookout for something like that, and if you figure out what the trap is, let me know, and so forth.
Oh, interesting.
But he was our general tour guide as well.
Okay. So you moved on from that to the Golden Pavilion. Now, was the Golden Pavilion in the same location?
No, we actually like had to take a bus to a different location for it.
So what was the Golden Pavilion?
It was honestly very interesting because like the entire top half of it is made out of gold.
Actual gold.
Yep, actual
Wow.
gold. It was very like beautiful to see, and there was also surrounded by like a big lake, and there were also like trees that were also planted around it that looked very nice. Trees in Japan look very different than trees in the US for the
Yeah.
most part, unless you go into the mountain area, but that was very it was very nice to see, and thankfully it helped me. At that point, I also had another one of the parents helping me to calm down and to at least appreciate that. So yeah, the Golden Pavilion was very pretty.
Okay. So from here, you moved on to what would have been my favorite part of the trip, and that's you got to ride the bullet train,
Yep, that was the next day.
the Shinkansen. How was that? Explain to us because I know they're on a very tight schedule there. You only have a certain amount of time to get on. What was
Okay.
that like?
So we had to basically carry our luggage around for most of the trip, but when it came to the day that we spent after the bullet train, we couldn't take our luggage with us because if we were to try and get it on the bullet train, it would take us much longer and probably we wouldn't have been able to get on it. So basically, we had to pack in our backpacks what we were going to need for a night's stay in the one hotel, and then we'd eventually have our bag shipped to Tokyo. So we all had to do that, and then when we got to the station, we all had to make sure we were on time, and when the doors opened to it, we had to all rush in because they only stay open for 2 minutes, so anyone that needed to get off had to get off, and then everyone that needed to get in had to get in.
Okay. How was the ride? I know you were fast. I know statistically the train gets up to 200 miles an hour. Did you feel like you were going fast?
When I was inside, the only thing that really indicated that we were going fast is that my ears had to like pop constantly. It was actually surprisingly relaxing. The inside was kind of like a bigger airplane in a way because it had 3 seats and an aisle, and they also had like tray tables on the chairs and like a little basket to hold stuff. But like the legroom, there was a lot more legroom. The aisle was a lot bigger. It was honestly very comfortable, and the seats themselves were also like pretty
Okay.
spacious. I will admit, the outside was not at all what I was expecting it to look like. I was expecting it to be like this very futuristic, very techy, very like metallic glass, like kind of open glass sort of area, and it's like it was basically kind of like a monorail. It was basically like a plane, but as a train.
Right.
It looked like it had kind of like a polyester white stained outside, and I'm like, what? This doesn't really look like how I was expecting it. I think it was kind of like, I thought it was like, future techie and so forth, and it really kind of didn't look all that like futuristic. The inside was nice looking, but like it still kind of resembled like you were inside of an airplane, and I'm like, okay, did not expect this at all.
So you've ridden trains in the US and now you've ridden a train in Japan. How do they compare?
Well, with this one, there were like a lot of tunnels, and like there were tunnels that were immediately pitch black to the point that when I was filming at one point, we went in one of the tunnels and like I could clearly see my reflection because of how like dark the outside was. The train itself was fast, obviously, and the boarding part of it, like the doors themselves were honestly like very small, surprisingly, and like you did kind of have to push your way out because it literally stayed open for only 2 minutes, and like everyone was worried that we either left someone at the station or we left someone in the train. Thankfully, we all got out in time, though.
Okay, so from there, where did you wind up? So you went there, you went to see Odawara Castle next.
Yeah.
What was that? Was that smaller or bigger than the first castle?
I mean, it was kind of not. I think it was a little bigger. than the other one, but like the other one, like the building itself was smaller, but like the whole like protection it had around it, I think was bigger.
Okay. So you were also up in the Fuji Hakone Izu National Park, if I pronounced that right. That was where you took a cruise on Lake Ashi.
Yep.
How was that?
Okay, so, well, we actually did a couple of things there. For one, there was a cable car ride up the one mountain. I didn't do that because I'm afraid of heights, but I stayed down with I think the teacher that I ended up orchestrating the whole trip, and there they had like a bunch of, you were also supposed to do lunch there, so there were a bunch of different like restaurants and so forth, and that's where I actually got the first souvenirs, and that's actually like the part of the trip that I actually started to enjoy more. The boat cruise was very interesting because the boat itself had like 4 different layers to it, and like there was a very cozy looking relaxation area on the second floor. On the third floor, they had like swings that were kind of like, they were bolted to the ground, but like you could still kind of swing in them. They also had like almost beach chairs and benches as well. They had like a lot of comfortable looking seating, and the lake itself was actually formed because of volcanic activity, so it's at a high elevation, but like water circulation was cut off because of the mountains that were created, so it turned into a lake. So there were mountains all around it, and you could also see a lot of the buildings, and I got a lot of really cool shots from it.
So that region itself is actually very well known, the national park region there, for its natural landscapes and stuff like that. Does it compare to anything you've ever seen in the United States, or is it something that's just unique to Japan?
I mean, like, I'm pretty sure there would be, you know, like mountain ranges that were kind of similar, but I did think it was interesting that all around the lake it was mountains, and like some of them got higher than others. And when we were on the bus, there were a lot of really interesting like mountain areas that we actually like drove past. Some of them actually looked like they were steaming, but it was probably just the fog, but it was still like, you know, really cool to see.
Okay. So from there you were moving on to Tokyo via Kamakura, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you stopped at the, I'm going to murder this one, Mangu Shrine, where the great Buddha of Kamakura is.
Yes.
Let's talk about that one a little.
Okay, so that one, it's pretty much at the area we went to, it was pretty much just this Buddha. And while it didn't compare to this, it was a little smaller than the first Buddha we'd seen in Nara, but like it was still like interesting to see. We ended up getting like some more history about the Buddha itself. There were like there was like incense that were being burned. There was also something in front of it that was like fruit and offerings and so forth. But that was also kind of just it. The Buddha itself was like, I think you could actually pay money to like go inside the Buddha. But for the most part, the Buddha was kind of just the whole thing. And we were given like over an hour to stay there, and at one point me and my friend just ended up going to just go back to the bus. That was also the first time I experienced a public restroom in Japan, and by first I mean only. Okay. Because, I mean, I don't like public restrooms in general, but in Japan, they have bidets, like, everywhere pretty much, because, like, 80%, after it was made, 80% of, like, Japanese homes now have bidets.
So explain for the audience what a bidet is.
Basically, it's a very high-tech toilet that has the ability to, like, it's mostly, I think it's mostly kind of something that women use, because it's not something that men often use unless they're not just going to use the restroom
So it's basically something that squirts water and washes your bottom.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
I don't know how to say that, you know. And the thing is, some of them are actually different because some also, like, have seat warmers and can also sense when you're on it. So, like, when you sit down, your butt gets warm.
It's good to know that the bidets were the highlight of the trip.
Well, it wasn't really the highlight because I don't think I'm ever really going to be able to use one because I didn't actually use the water spray function because some of them also made noise when you got on them, and I think some of them could even play music for you.
So you guys ate while you were there too, right?
Not at that place.
But you ate in that local area there.
Probably, yeah.
It wasn't a fast food place that you ate at.
Yeah.
So how does the food compare from region to region? Is it similar? Do they have local food variations that they have, or is it pretty much the same wherever you ate local?
Well, in certain areas, there were actually like delicacies of like the specific region. Like some stuff was more common in Osaka than in Kyoto. And there were like even the places we went to, there were certain foods that were made specifically because of the region it was in.
Mm-hmm.
But they also had a bunch of fast food places like Wendy's. We ended up seeing like KFC's, McDonald's, Starbucks.
So they're fairly modern.
So yeah, they still have like, you know, your typical like fast food areas that you'd see in the United States.
Okay. So from there you moved on to Tokyo, and we're going to take our last break, and we're going to come back and wrap up your last 2 days, starting with Tokyo. We'll be right back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
We are talking all things Japan, or at least all things Japan trip, on today's episode of Insights into Teens. So we have arrived in Tokyo. What was your first impressions of Tokyo? Big city, very crowded, very packed in, another area to be out of your element there. But what was your first impressions of it? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it?
I mean, at that point when we were in Tokyo, like I'd finally gotten used to everything. And it was definitely different because like in Osaka, like it was a very like food centric area, which is why, you know, we tried a lot of the food at that point. In Kyoto, it was fashion centric, and also because it used to be the capital for like over 1,000 years in Japan, the people, like we were actually told, like the woman that was that ended up guiding our tour the whole way, she originally was in Hiroshima but ended up moving to Kyoto when when I think her daughter graduated, and she learned very quickly that the people of Kyoto are somewhat like kind of have an air of a sense of arrogance, almost like
an almost like aristocratic flair because of the prestige of the city.
Well, kind of. They were like she mentioned how like some of them would make like backhanded compliments and so forth, and like if they said like, "Oh, you have a nice watch," that like you at a party, that basically meant that they wanted you to leave, which was
interesting.
You know.
So while you were there, you did see a couple more temples, right?
Yeah.
And anything highlight-wise worthy of mentioning from the temples, the Asakusa Kannon Temple and the Meiji Shinto Shrine?
Well, one of them had like a set of 60 stairs that we ended up climbing up. That was
like Rocky.
Yeah. I mean, there were people that made that reference as well. Like, I want to run up this like Rocky and so forth. it was very tiring to get all the way up there. But still, obviously, very nice architecture. And then the other shrine was actually a nature-based god. So the traditional Torii temple is typically painted orange, but I guess in like the nature-centric shrines, they actually don't paint them, and like you see the like natural wood of the gate.
Interesting. So you also attended the Akihabara Electric Town? Or did
No,
you?
we didn't do that.
You didn't do that. Okay. That was still on the agenda then. So we didn't do that. What else did we do that was interesting in Tokyo?
Well, there was Joypolis.
Ah, yes. Talk about that.
So Joypolis is basically this indoor amusement park. I think that one of the biggest in Japan, and it's entirely VR, but like they actually had amusement rides that used VR. I didn't go on any of them, but I did see one that did like it. There was kind of like almost an upside down roller coaster at one point where you like actually wore VR glasses. They also had a ton of claw machines, and something that I ended up using a lot in the end of the trip were these vending machines that you'd put some yen coins in and you'd turn it and then you'd get like something out, obviously.
So that's interesting that you mentioned that. So before you went, one of the other things, preparation things, was exchanging some U.S. currency for Japanese yen. What's the almost comedic ratio that you're looking at for yen to US dollars as an equivalent?
It was very interesting because like we ended up looking it up at one point, and it's like about $30 in US currency is 5,000 yen in Japan. And along with that, everything is very cheap in Japan. So I actually remember I would get, they were also like...
Except for the Kobe beef.
Well, yeah, except that. But when it came to like getting, there was also like a bunch of vending machines for drinks and so forth. And at one point when I ended up getting a Sprite, I paid, I think, 140 yen for it, which actually is less than $1 in US currency. And it was an entire can of Sprite.
That's funny. That's almost like paying pennies in the United States for things rather than dollars.
Yeah, and I got a Dr. Pepper as well, and that was only $1.
Wow. Okay. So you guys did Joyopolis. You also had kind of a free day or somewhat of a free day that you guys could do stuff. What did you wind up doing with that free time?
Well, after dinner, me and a good portion of the trip went to Tokyo Disneyland.
And how did that go?
Well, trying to get there was kind of a pain because we wasted like an hour trying to get an Uber for everybody because we had to like get a good number of people because the max you could get is like 5, but then we had to downsize to 4 so that we had an easier time with the Uber, which was, fun to have to figure out. But when we got there, we figured out where the entrance was thanks to a couple that showed us where we needed to go. By that point, we had like 2 hours before the park closed. And like we only had to pay like $33 to get in from 5 to 9.
Yeah, that half day price is just insane. Because you guys bought the tickets ahead of time.
Yes, online.
And mommy helped you out getting that stuff taken care of. So you had your tickets walking in. You were there 2 hours. What can you do in Tokyo Disneyland for 2 hours?
Well, at one point I wanted to, at the very least, go to the Tokyo Disneyland Haunted Mansion because mommy is a big Haunted Mansion fan.
She is.
I'm saying it for the audience's sake. I don't know if they have seen anything relating to that. So
it's hard not to if you actually watch the video version of the podcast. Not get that.
I get that. So I actually went with the same parent that had been helping me because I wanted to, at the very least, get some picture of the Haunted Mansion. And I did, but they didn't come out as anything because it was not lit up like everything else.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even see it. But we were able to go on it. And it honestly is very interesting how different it is because it is actually based on the original version of the Magic Kingdom Haunted Mansion, but it hasn't been updated, at least with like the modern scenes, like with Constance's backstory or anything. So we went in. The narration is entirely in Japanese, which, you know, not that big of a shock. They didn't have like the one like interactive queue line that they have in the States. When we got in, the ride itself, it actually starts off in like when you're in the Magic Kingdom ride, when you go through the one hallway where the lightning comes in and the paintings are changing, they actually have it so that the paintings that used to be in like the waiting area where you would get on the doom buggies, those paintings and the paintings that were in the changing portrait line are actually like all in the same room. There's no windows. They're all like kind of tilting. The Mariner one is at the top of the wall. It's honestly a very different scene compared to in...
So it was definitely a different experience then.
Yep. There were books in the library that looked like they were new. One of the worst differences I saw was instead of the endless staircases, there were like 3 spider figures
Just
that were
for
there.
You. They put them in just for you for
and
that
of course
trip.
they made them like neon colors, so they were incredibly obvious. In the lights themselves were all red, which I thought was interesting when you ended up getting into the hallway and so forth. There was also this painting that like it was like a solid thing, but it looked like it jumped out at you like a face was melting into it.
Oh, that's cool.
And then one of the doors had green light coming out of it, and like you genuinely thought like there was like scratching, and it kind of jumped at you as if something was pounding against the door. The Madame Leota scene, she was all in English, which I thought was strange, and there was a lot less going on in her seance room. The ballroom scene was pretty much the same. Constance's was again based on the original version where she was known as the Beating Heart Bride, and all throughout you hear like her beating heart. And they were actually a lot more like the jumping ghosts, like the ones that you see in the graveyard. And I unfortunately got scared by some of them, which...
Yeah. They always did get to you.
The graveyard scene and everything else was kind of the same, but it did actually look nicer in Tokyo. And then with the hitchhiking ghosts, when it came to the mirror scene, instead of like doing anything with like your heads or anything and switching them around, they kind of just like were in there shaking their heads like, hey, we're with you or something.
Bobblehead ghost.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and that kind of wrapped up the majority of the trip there. We're going to take a quick break, come back, and we'll let you wrap up with your final thoughts on what you enjoy, what you didn't enjoy, how you're going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. We'll be right back for that.
All right, so as the first time I traveled internationally, Japan was definitely interesting. It's somewhat like in the States, and then also not at all either. There were things that reminded me of the States, but also things that had nothing to do with the States. It was definitely hard to get used to in the beginning, which I feel is why I was kind of antsy about it in the beginning, but I eventually did find my comfort level with it, and it became a very enjoyable experience, and I'm very glad that I did it.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad you did it too. I commend you for having the courage. I think it took a lot of courage to put yourself in a position that was so outside your comfort zone. And yeah, you had a couple of panic attacks, but I think for the most part, you didn't give up on it. You managed to get through it. And I have to tell you, I'm very proud of you for sticking it out there and being able to cope with it, because it was probably the most difficult thing I think you've had to do in a very long time. So that's all we had for today. Before we go, I want to once again invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Teens. You can find audio and video versions of all the network's podcasts listed as Insights into Things. And we're available on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Buzzsprout, etc. I would also invite you to write into us. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can hit us up on X at insights_things. You can find streaming 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. You can also give us a call now. Leave a message for us and we'll get you on one of the future podcasts. You can call in to 856-403-8788. That's it. Another one in the books.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
No credits rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen. I'm your host today, and every day. How about that? Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the fine folks over at Philly Drinkers have partnered with the show to provide you with awesome Philadelphia sports merch for all your favorite teams. Make sure to use the link in the description to shop their collection, and every purchase you make helps out the show. Today's show is going to be a little bit shorter. I wasn't even going to do an episode this week, but there's just too many games to talk about, folks. So I decided to get on the mic and just give my thoughts on a couple of games that I've been playing lately. And that's pretty much what we're going to cover today. There's not going to be a whole lot of news. I did try to include a news story to go with each of these reviews, just to keep some element of the news in there. But it's mostly going to be reviews. It's going to be me yapping for however long I want to go, talking about 2 games that I've been playing in the last week or so. Also, before we get started, I want to remind everyone to go ahead and leave a like on the show, leave a review, leave 5 stars wherever you can, wherever you subscribe. Every little bit helps. Every little bit of traction we get helps the show get out there and to get more people listening. That's really what I appreciate. If you've been a listener since the beginning, I really appreciate you too. Anything you do to help support the show, whether it's listening or commenting or subscribing or liking, every little bit helps, and I appreciate each and every one of you. That's enough of me wasting your time. Let's get into the reviews. First game I want to talk about today is XDefiant. You might have seen it. It's kind of making the rounds. It's the new free-to-play shooter from Ubisoft. It is a arena-based shooter, and the story I have to go with it is that Ubisoft is working to fix XDefiant's busted hit registration, which I will talk about in a second. But first, just a general overview of the game. I've been describing this as the Ubisoft Cinematic Universe, even though it's not movies. It's just kind of like their version of the MCU. So it's a free-to-play first-person shooter developed by Ubisoft San Francisco, which is known for Rocksmith, which was the guitar teaching game that I tried to play and was really bad at. And also South Park, The Fractured But Whole. Now, for all, you don't have to cover your ears. It's 2 different words, BUTWHOLE. It's 2 different words, folks. I don't want to get censored or anything. So they're known for those games, but now they're coming out with XDefiant. My friends and I are debating if it should be called Cross-Defiant or X-Defiant. I like X-Defiant, so we're going to go with that. This game combines the worlds of The Division, Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, Watch Dogs 2 specifically, and Far Cry 6 specifically into a first-person shooter. It's kind of funny when you hover over these different factions when you go to pick your characters. They're very clear about what games they're pulling from here. They get a little broad with things like Splinter Cell, but with Far Cry, it's definitely Far Cry 6, and it's definitely Watch Dogs 2, and they really want you to know that. And again, it is a first-person shooter. So basically what you're doing in this game, right, you're shooting, you're picking your faction. There are, 5 different factions. You don't have the Watch Dogs faction unlocked currently at the start. I believe you have to earn about 7,000 XP, which is a lot to unlock them. But each faction comes with their own abilities, their own perks, their own benefits, but the guns are shared in between each faction. So, for example, the Rainbow Six, they're not in the game yet, but they will be when the official first season starts. Currently, we're just in the preseason. But for example, the Division class, you're kind of like these bad guy firefighters, so you deal incendiary damage as your passive ability when you shoot, and you have access to a flame drone that you can send out that blows up and lights everything on fire, or the alternate ability you can choose is sort of a Molotov that you throw at your feet and blow everything up. The Ghost Recon class, they have more health for some reason. The Far Cry class, they kind of passively heal when they're in a group because they're supposed to be like revolutionaries, and so on and so forth. So you're getting a little bit of that hero shooter aspect. Hero shooter, arena shooter, each one or the other. And you're kind of meshing these abilities. And currently in this preseason, there are really only objective-based modes. So there's like a payload mode, and there is a capture the point domination sort of mode. And I've been having a lot of fun with it. My friends and I have been playing it. I'm a sucker for any new free-to-play game that will come out that might be terrible. But I would say X-Defiant definitely isn't terrible. It definitely has its flaws in its current phase, but like I said, it is a preseason, and hopefully they're going to work out a lot of these kinks once the full thing releases in Season 1. I definitely think the game has a lot of potential. With that backing of Ubisoft, if they really want to do this, if they really want to commit to this game being their free-to-play shooter, their free-to-play arena shooter that they're going to update and add things like cosmetics to, their live service. We've talked about live service games on this show before. If this is how Ubisoft is going to really try to, compete with things like Call of Duty, then I think it's a good start. It's definitely a good start, but there are things they need to work on. So the gameplay is very fast-paced, right? The time to kill is pretty short. There have been matches where I'm spawning and dying instantly because of poor spawns, which I'll get to in a second. The majority of the game modes, like I said, are objective-based. There is no straight TDM or anything like that, but I'm guessing those will probably be added once that first season fully launches. In terms of the guns are a little iffy, right? The guns feel a little, I would say they feel a little cheap. I'd say they feel okay overall. With some of the ones I've unlocked definitely feeling better than others. The LMGs are my favorite weapon so far, but in any kind of first-person shooter, I tend to gravitate towards the LMG. It's just my preferred weapon in most games. So that's what I started using when I first started playing this game, because I found the assault rifles and the SMGs they just don't do enough damage, in my opinion, at least the ones you start with. But the LMGs, I think, are pretty consistently good. They do enough damage, they pack enough punch, and the more right now I'm using the second one I've unlocked is the RPK, and it's pretty great. I know there are people that play on PC that like the SMGs because they can get those headshots. I'm just not that good, so I'm going with the LMG. I'm no shooter expert by any means. I want to make that clear. I always try to give these kind of caveats whenever I talk about games like this. I'm not the expert. I've played a lot of shooters. I've been, one of the first games I played when I first touched a controller was Halo, but I don't know like the pro strats and things like that. I just like to play these kind of games. So take what I say with a grain of salt. As far as the maps go, I think it's one of the standouts of the game. I really like the map design. There's one map in particular that I think is really cool, the Coney Island map. It's like, Coney Island, like a big carnival. But it's a payload map in that instance. And there's a lot of different phases to it where you're going through like a big haunted house or there's like a pirate section, there's like a Egypt section. It's really neat. And it kind of reminds me of Overwatch, where those maps have so much character and life to them, and there's so many things you can pick out and notice. And I think a lot of these maps do that as well in X-Defiant. And they're also from Ubisoft games. They're taken from various locations from the different games that are represented in the factions. So a lot of them are from The Division, because The Division takes place in New York and Washington, D.C., so they can just take, any section of it and call it a map. I think visually it looks pretty great. Graphically, it's pretty great. It's a very bright game. I don't know the right term for that, maybe saturation or something, but the colors really pop, I think. And those Division maps, for me, are most recognizable from the little bit I've played of The Division. It's a very specific audience to cater to, but I found it neat. I'm like, oh, hey, this looks like The Division, and it's cool to see those things in first person versus in the Division, you're usually in third person. So seeing these kind of similar map designs from that game in this new environment is pretty neat, I think. And, I'm easy to please when it comes to things like that. So like I've been saying throughout this review, the game is still in its early phases, and there's a lot of issues that will probably be fixed with patches. Like I said at the top of this story, Ubisoft is working on the hit detection in particular. And yeah, the hit registration is pretty bad. You get killed around corners almost constantly. It's definitely my biggest gripe with the game. You feel like you're in cover, you feel like you're behind a wall or behind some piece of cover, and you still die. I mean, there have been times where I round the corner, I turn around, and I see the bullets that are hitting me just clipping right through the wall. Not because of bullet penetration, but literally because of the hit detection and how the bullets are coming at me. It's extremely frustrating, I'll be honest. And it's also when you're shooting an enemy. There is a quote here from, a quote from our most reputable sources here on the internet, a user by the name of bloody_psycho666. I'm sure they are the premier journalists when it comes to these things. But they said, quote, the M16 feels like I'm shooting hopes and dreams at the enemies, which, as someone that likes to unlock the M16 in any of these shooters, I feel so vindicated seeing that quote, because just yesterday at the time of recording, I had unlocked the M16 and I was using it with my pal Joe, who's been on the show. And there were so many instances where I'm pointing directly at the enemy firing and my bullets are just not hitting them. It feels like I'm every third burst I fire is just not real. So to see that gun get specifically called out makes a lot of sense and definitely would explain my issues. But aside from just that, there's a Redditor who, again, we're going for the best sources here, primary sources if you've gone to journalism school. Redditor's always a primary source. His name is Chuck Bank for Bo. Called the hit registration, quote, the worst I've seen in a long time. He says, I'm surviving way longer running and jumping around bullets than I would in any other games, cause, that's C-U-Z, their shots just won't connect. And then he ends with, lol, LOL. So some hard-hitting commentary from Chuck there. But it's true. I mean, I'm joking, obviously, but it is true. When your whole game is a first-person shooter, these are the kind of things you have to nail, or people aren't going to want to play it, because it's the one thing you're doing is shooting. So if that doesn't feel great, if that doesn't feel responsive or accurate, it's going to turn a lot of people off. And it's definitely one of the barriers that my friends and I are dealing with now, is dealing with that kind of technical side of it that, is already kind of impeding our ability to enjoy the game. And that's not to even mention, the people that are extremely sweaty on PC, bunny hopping around corners, sliding, doing insane stuff that you can only do on PC. That combined with the hit detection issues, there are some matches where you're just completely outmatched by both the game itself and by the people that are just objectively better than you. But it is what it is. And another thing, while I'm complaining, I might as well pile it on. The spawn system is pretty tough, right? The spawns can suck sometimes. I've literally spawned on top of enemy players only to instantly die because they're right behind me with a gun to my head. And there's nothing you can really do in that situation. And I've really noticed it in the domination modes where the points might flip, so the spawns flip as well if people are capturing certain areas. There's also a mode, I guess you could call it King of the Hill. I'm blanking on what the name would be, but it's where the point essentially moves around the map and you stand on it to get the points, and then it times out and the new one spawns and you go there. There were matches that I've done where the point spawns where the enemies are spawning, and they just keep it, and then they do that over and over again, and you can't even get a chance to get in there and fight for it because the enemies, you're killing the enemies and they're respawning right where the objective is. So that stuff kind of sucks, and it makes it hard to just kind of have fun in the game, honestly. You do get that dopamine hit, which I love in games like this, where you get a lot of rewards popping up on screen when you're getting these kills. For example, like multi-kills. There is a healing aspect to the game where you can get rewarded for healing teammates, which I enjoy. And, I think the feedback when you do get a kill is pretty satisfying. Enemies do have health bars and things like that you can chip away at, which some people don't really like. I don't really mind it. But I think when you do get those kills, when you do pop off with a multi-kill, I do think it is satisfying. One thing I've pointed out to my friends, there's no music, I don't think, unless I am missing some sort of setting. There's no music during the match. There are sound effects. There are obviously the in-game sound effects, and there are sound effects for respawning and things like that. But there's no music, and I think it's really noticeable. It's really noticeable how quiet it can get without some kind of music. And I'm not asking for music the entire time, but maybe some punctuating music if you're maybe halfway through a match or something. My friends and I have been playing a ton of Rainbow Six Siege, and there is music in that game. Right when a match is about to end, the music will kind of swell and sort of, raise the tension and make it very dramatic. So I think little touches like that would really help too, and sort of flesh out the soundscape of the game. But overall, if you like COD, I would check it out. It's very much like COD. It does feel cheaper than COD. That's the best way I can describe it. It feels a little bit lower budget, a little bit less AAA, and a little bit more cartoony. And I don't mean cartoony as in Overwatch. I mean cartoony in like a COD mobile kind of way. And that sounds bad, but it's not quite that level of like a mobile game. But you know what I mean if you go play it and you compare it to those kind of games. I would definitely check it out if you do enjoy the COD multiplayer, though, especially if you liked Black Ops 3 and 4, because we are working in those arena shooter, hero shooter aspects with the different factions having different abilities, and there being a little bit of synchronization with those abilities if you want to do that. Most people don't. They just want to shoot and turn their brain off. But there is a little bit of potential there for team play. There is a ranked mode. Joe and I did a match of that and got absolutely dominated. But maybe in that mode, it's a 4v4 currently in this. They're doing like a trial run of the ranked mode. But maybe, there's potential there too if you really want to put some time into it. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here with talking about XDefiant is I'm wondering what the staying power of this game will be with my friends and I, because we were a big fan of the finals when it came out. I don't think I ever talked about the finals on this show, but it was another free-to-play shooter, 3v3v3v3, I think. I'm not just a skipping record there. It was a team-based thing with teams of 3. There was some variation depending on the mode you played, but my friends and I were very much into that game for a while. And then eventually it just kind of got stale, right? We just kind of stopped playing it because there wasn't enough new content. The gameplay loop kind of got stale. People were just better than us and were just dominate, especially if they're on PC, because we are on console. And eventually it just kind of faded away. And I'm wondering if that same thing will happen with XDefiant. It kind of needs that sauce to make it stand out and to make us want to come back to it over and over again. Now, it might be something that I personally stick with, that I play on my own and level up, I got to get the battle pass, got to swipe the card, already did. You know how it is. Support the Patreon, by the way. But in terms of something that my friends and I play together, I'm curious if it will have that staying power either in this preseason or when that full release happens, if they're going to be bringing the content, bringing the maybe weapons or new maps or new factions that get us back in and say, hey, you know what? Let's put Siege on the back burner for today. Let's boot up XDefiant, do a couple rounds, and, kind of have a good time. Only time will tell, folks. And again, it's interesting seeing this with the backing of Ubisoft, right? That budget, the IPs that Ubisoft have. I'm not saying like The Division is like a COD killer or anything, but it is cool seeing these different IPs utilized in one game. And I think there's a lot of potential there, right? I mean, Ubisoft, you still got Assassin's Creed, you still got Rainbow Six, which I believe is coming in that first season. Will we see the Rabbids? Will we see the Rabbids in XDefiant? Boy, I hope so. But yeah, only time will tell. But anyway, that's my thoughts on XDefiant. We're going to take a quick little break, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about my second game today, Starfield. You're listening to No Credits Rolled. And we're back on No Credits Rolled. We just got done talking about XDefiant, and now I want to cover Starfield. Now, I have talked a lot of smack on this game, and this is sort of my moment to sort of make my peace with that, to apologize to all you Starfield fans out there, because with this new update that Bethesda released for their sci-fi RPG, Starfield is officially back in my gaming rotation. When I've got some free time to myself, this is one of the games that I am turning to boot up, just to exist in this world. And I've done reviews now on Fallout 76 and Fallout New Vegas, so I'm definitely in that Bethesda mood, that I have that Bethesda itch. And Starfield is really starting to satisfy that in terms of being a modern Bethesda game that I am invested in. And this is all because of the recent update. It dropped in May, probably 2 weeks ago at the time of recording. Now, the headline I have here is that Starfield's May update causes head-scratching new problems, which, hey, if that doesn't sound like Bethesda, I don't know what is. We covered, an episode or 2 episodes ago when they did that Fallout 4 update, and it completely demolished one of the mods, the biggest mods that were coming out for the game. So, Bethesda is maybe fixing things with a hammer instead of maybe a finer tool that needs to be done. But hey, it got me back in. But yeah, I've talked a lot of trash on this game, and it definitely has its hooks in me now. The biggest thing, honestly, for me, and you can bash me in the comments if you want for this, but the frame rate update really is helping me get back into this game. I am such a sucker, or a stickler, I should say, for that at least 60 frames. I feel like there's no excuse at this point. Everything should be 60 frames, and this update is able to do that. The game can now run 60 frames. I think you're able to choose 40 if you want to go for visuals, or 60 if you want to do full performance. And it's fairly consistent. I'd say like 80% of the time it is consistently holding 60 frames a second. That being said, when I booted it up for the first time and went back into one of my side quests, and I was like, wow, look how good this looks. Immediately in that side quest, there were massive frame drops. I mean, we're talking down into the 20 frames a second probably, maybe even lower. So that was disappointing. And you do get those frame drops maybe in large city areas when you're first landing or walking in, rather. If there's a lot of effects and things going on screen, if there's a lot of enemies on screen, you do still get those frame drops. But most of the time it is holding 60, which is great. And the game looks fantastic. When it is running at full speed and no issues, the game is really stunning looking. In particular, I think the character models and dialogue can look amazing. There are some characters that look better than others, and sometimes it can border just a little bit on that uncanny valley. But, I mean, when it hits, it looks great. There's one character in particular, I'm blanking on his name. I'm going to talk about him more later, but he's like the old guy in your team. He sort of is he's like a billionaire that's sort of funding your project. He's, the eccentric billionaire character that you've seen in other things, but his facial capture looks great. Like, there was a moment where I was talking to him and he wrapped up a piece of dialogue, and on the last word he said, his eyebrows like scrunched up in a way that a real human's eyebrows would, that you wouldn't even notice in, the real world, because people have all sorts of facial tics. But to see that in the game and to see that reflected in the performance capture was like, it kind of like blew my mind. It looked so realistic that it looked like I was, it looked like a real person. Now, that uncanny valley does kind of come in, especially with eyes. I think the eyes look a little weird at times, or the tracking for where NPCs are looking when you're talking to them. A little strange there, but I think overall this is a huge improvement, especially coming off of things like New Vegas and 76. It's tough to even compare because of the difference. And I think if this is the path that Bethesda goes forward with, we're going to see some crazy stuff with this tech or whatever they're using to make these facial captures look as good as they do. So my whole reason for getting back into this game, and part of the reason I wanted to even do this podcast, was because of one particular side quest I did recently that by the time I finished it, I basically said, okay, look, I am fully back in. This game has its hooks in me. I want to keep playing. I'm excited to see where this goes. So I just want to tell the quick story about it. So it was that character I mentioned before, the rich guy, and I'm going to look him up. His name's Walter Stroud, everybody. Walter Stroud. So Walter comes to you and he says, hey, I want to buy this artifact off this dealer, but it's on this planet that is known for its shady dealings. It's like any shady planet you've seen in Star Wars is essentially what we're dealing with here. So Walter comes to you, he says, I want to buy this artifact, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get screwed over somehow. I just essentially want to use you as hired muscle. So, my guy, I'm kind of playing him as like a cowboy type. I'm sort of trying to be, not necessarily morally gray, definitely leaning more towards morally good, sort of, but, I'm willing to bend the rules if I need to at times, right? So Walter says I need some hired muscle. I say, okay, sure, because he's, I'm part of this group. I think they're called the Collective, maybe. They're like your little team. So Walter's part of the team. He's bankrolling the whole team. So I say, okay, let's go. So we go to this planet, and he says, when you get there, he says, all right, go case where we're doing the deal, which is this like big club where they sell this like special drug that you can only get at the club. And if you try to leave with that drug, if you try to leave the planet with that drug, you can get arrested but it's legal in this city. So there's already cool sci-fi stuff going on. So I go to the club, and it reminds me a lot of Mass Effect, the clubs in that game, space clubs. You've probably seen them. Lots of bright colors, lots of bass music. But the colors in this club are really striking. It's It's like a lot of pinks and blues and purples, and it's a contrast to what's outside, because outside it looks like Coruscant from Star Wars, lots of oranges and browns and still neon advertisements, but definitely a stark contrast. So we get in the club, and I go and I talk to the bartender and I say, hey, we're looking to do this deal here. Is there anything I should know? And you're able to do a persuasion check with him where you can sort of get the guards on your side. If anything goes wrong, I'm able to go upstairs once I get the guards on my side, because I'm able to access the VIP lounge, and I find the security controls, and I'm able to hack the door so that in the room where we're having the meeting, I can close the door whenever I want, assuming we need to trap the guy in there. So I do both those things. I cover both those bases, and I go back to Walter and I say, hey, all right, let's do this. So he says, okay, you got to wait and you got to find the guy with the package, because we don't know who he is, but he's going to have this big briefcase. So I sit in the club and I wait, and I see everybody walking around until I find the NPC with the giant briefcase. Turns out it wasn't. I was kind of overthinking it. I was sitting watching the crowd, watching people walk in and out. Turns out the guy was there the whole time, up against the wall with a briefcase, so whatever. My bad. So anyway, I find the guy, and there's like a code phrase you have to say, which they do give you the wrong dialogue. I don't know what happens if you click that, but I say the right code phrase, and he's like, all right, let's do this. I go back, I get Walter, we go up in the meeting room, and the guy, before we go up there, Walter says, he's like, hey, look, this guy's probably going to ask for double because he's some, low rent guy in this company that doesn't really care. He just wants to get his money and get out. Sure enough, the meeting starts and the guy does just that. So the whole time during this meeting, you can close the door or you can pull your gun and just start blasting. But I sort of follow Walter's lead, because he tells you, he says, look, let's try to avoid bloodshed if we can. So I'm like, okay, Walter, let's give that a shot. And we end up doing the dialogue with the guy. We talk him down. Walter essentially has infinite money, so that's a fun bargaining chip, because you can just give him whatever you want. And I end up avoiding bloodshed with this guy, and I get the artifact, and Walter pays him, and the guy leaves. So you walk outside, and all of a sudden you're held at gunpoint by all these guards. And the guards are like, hey, we're from this other company that's competing with Walter's company. And they're like, hey, that's our artifact. And then you're like, okay, well, I guess that's where that guy stole the artifact from. He worked for this competing company, stole it, and is trying to sell it to Walter's company. And because I had the guards on my side from casing the joint before, I was able to sort of have the guards come over and say, hey, this guy's accosting me. Let's, can you break this up? And they're like, okay. The guards back down, but they say, you're not getting off this planet with that artifact. They end up impounding my ship. So Walter and I are now stuck on the planet. And he says, look, Walter says, I know who's doing this. It's this corporate rival that works for this other company. We got to break into his office to stop, get our ship freed, to lift the impounding. So I'm like, all right. So we walk over to the other guy's office. We go to the front desk, and I fail the persuasion check to try to just let me in, right, to go talk to the CEO, which, understandable. If you walk into Apple headquarters and ask to talk to Tim Cook or whoever's in charge, they're probably not going to let you in. So then Walter says, well, okay, we can find another way in. That involves sneaking. Now, as we're sneaking, Walter's wife appears. I forgot to mention this. Walter's wife is the other co-owner of his company. And she gets on the comms and she's like, all right, well, here's how you can sneak in. It involves crawling up the side of the building through elevator shafts, in ventilation ducts. It becomes like a Mission Impossible corporate espionage spy thing for a second. And I end up getting to the exterior of the building. I end up taking out the guards and getting all the way to this guy's office. And then, you walk in, and of course the guy's expecting you, right? Of course the guy's got guards ready, waiting for you. And he says, all right, you're going to give me the artifact, and then we're just going to kill you. However, Walter, because he has infinite money, proposes that he just absorbs this guy's company and makes it part of his company and allows this guy to just profit endlessly, essentially. And again, at any point you can start blasting and killing everyone. But I'm able to talk this guy off the ledge with Walter's help to have that guy join the company. And the guy's like, all right, well, fine, because, money solves all problems, as you know. And he says, okay, one last thing. We actually caught that guy from the beginning that sold you the artifact, and he's currently bleeding out my office because we shot him and took him prisoner. But if you want to wrap this up, I want you to deal with him. You as in the player character, me. So I walk into this guy's office, and sure enough, the guy's there bleeding on the table. And Walter's like, look, let's go easy on this guy. He's just a cog in the machine. He didn't mean to inflict any harm. And again, you know, I'm deferring to Walter because by this point, Walter's kind of won me over. And so I go and talk to the guy, and he's like, hey, look, please don't kill me, essentially. And I say, okay, look, we're going to let you go. But you can't speak any of this ever again. And the guy says, all right, fine, sure. And that's how it ends. And the guy ends up going free. We get the artifact. That Walter ends up buying that guy's company, and we all live happily ever after. And it was just such a cool quest line of twists and turns and of different environments and you know, there's always this thing where if you peel back the layers or you look at behind the curtains, you can see that this outcome probably would have happened no matter what, right? I probably would have ended up in this guy's office no matter what, talking to him, blah, 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 blah. But it was enough of an illusion for me that I really felt it. I felt like my choices mattered, and I felt like this path that I took fit how I was playing my character. It fit the world. It fit the character of Walter, who I'm sort of learning now because he's part of my team. And like I said, the different elements of it, of the corporate espionage to a little bit of combat, to the dialogue, to the choosing in the beginning to case the club and get those extra benefits, it all felt so great. And it all kind of wrapped up in a neat little bow of being able to let this courier guy go at the end and, you know, show that mercy and to have it all tie back into the beginning of the mission when we met him in the first place. And it was that quest that made me be like, okay, this is really interesting and I'm very much into this. And that was kind of what got its hooks in me. And I was like, all right, we're going to keep doing this. Anyway, that was a very long-winded story, but if those kind of quests interest you, or if you like those Bethesda things where you take a side quest and it ends up, you know, 2 hours of fun you never thought you'd have, then, you know, Starfield definitely has those kind of quests waiting for you. But anyway, during the marketing, I think they described the design of the ships and things like that as NASA punk, which was kind of cringy at the time. But I really do notice that, especially in the base ship that you have, because I don't really care about upgrading my ship or changing it, because there is a pretty robust ship design mechanic. But I'm not really touching any of that. There's a lot of wires and switches and things, lots of analog tech that your ship uses and that exists in the world. I mean, most of the guns that I have currently are still, you know, firearms, regular, you know, they shoot bullets. There are laser guns and stuff, but it's not like super far future where it, you know, sci-fi is bordering on fantasy where, you know, technology is like magic. There are still those real world tangible things that you can connect with that, you know, you're like, okay, I can see how humanity evolved to this point with where we are in our world now and where Starfield is taking place. And like, for example, this is something that like, it really scratches a good itch for me that I don't know if people even care about. But when you go to do a grav warp, which is like light speed in this universe, your guy like brings out a panel in the ship and like flips a bunch of switches and turns a dial, and then the grav warp happens. And it's like, even that little touch of doing that in first person, it really helps with the immersion aspect of the game. And there's a lot of little touches like that that really help you get immersed in the world and make you feel like you're really, you know, this spacefaring cowboy or whatever you want to be. And I really enjoy stuff like that. I also recently did a mission where I got space powers, which didn't see that coming. I guess it's earlier in the game, but I never really did the main side quest when I tried to play the game initially. But you go to these temples and you find these artifacts, and each artifact you find gives you this unique space power. And it's kind of like the voice quest in Skyrim, where you're going around and getting different shouts and things like that. And you even activate them the same way by hitting the bumpers. But that's a whole other aspect of the game that I'm like, wow, I did not see this coming, and now I have superpowers. And it ties in the main quest, too, because you're discovering these artifacts for your group. And it's like, you know, I just keep finding these little surprises, and I'm like, wow, this isn't as bad as I initially thought. You know, I was so wrapped up when the game came out. I was so wrapped up in its poor performance and sort of barren planets and menus and things like that. And don't get me wrong, pretty much all that stuff is still there except for the performance, except for the frame drops. But the barren planets are still an issue. The menus are still a problem. I was going to get to that in a second, but I wanted to keep raining praise. You know, but I'm able to. I just think there was a lot of hype for this game, a lot of pressure put on this game, and I think that was part of why I was so critical on it, because at the time, it was sort of the make or break game for Xbox, right? Because of where they were at the time. And so there was a ton of pressure put on this, especially for it being a Bethesda game, an Xbox exclusive, all that stuff. And I think that was kind of why our expectations got so high. But now coming off of Fallout 76, Fallout New Vegas, and sort of recalibrating my gamer brain to how Bethesda games work, I think Starfield makes a lot more sense to me now. You know, my expectations are a little bit more metered. They're a little bit more baseline going into this game, and it's making me have a lot more fun than I ever did before. Now, there are still negatives that I would like to touch on because I don't want to just rain praise without any downside. The gunplay is still rough. You know, Bethesda's never really been great at that. It's certainly better than New Vegas, but it's a little bit closer to Fallout 4 in terms of how it feels. You do have like a jetpack that you can boost around, but it's not. I don't really think the game utilizes that movement system to its full potential. You're still just using whatever gun you have the most ammo for, shooting people over and over again until they die. Now, that being said, now that I've got the space powers, maybe as I work those in to the gameplay, maybe that will disrupt the gunplay a little bit more, like because the first one is an anti-gravity field you can create. So maybe I can lift up enemies and take them out that way, and that will spice things up. You know, there's definitely a lot more for me to see in this game because there are a lot more of these powers to unlock. But the gunplay is still a little bit rough. There's still a ridiculous amount of menus. There are so many quests that I've done where you go and you hover over the quest objective and you can set a course and you can basically fast travel to wherever you need to go right then and there. But sometimes it's in a system where you need to jump to one system. It's like a connecting flight is what it feels like. You have to jump to one system and then make another jump to refuel to get to where you need to go. So we're talking like 4 to 5 menus sometimes just to get to your one objective, just to talk to somebody and then have to turn around and go all the way back to where you just were to hand in the quest. It's a bit much. I mean, the load times are short, which is nice, but it's like, I just feel like there had to have been a better way to streamline this where I don't have to sit in so many menus and I don't have to just repeatedly fast travel until I get to where I need to go. And yeah, a lot of the planets are still pretty barren. There's kind of no getting around that. That's still an issue. But you know, when you're in these big hub areas where these quests are, you know, intertwining with the world, that stuff still stands out, I think, quite a bit. And other than the frame drops, there hasn't been anything major that is making me want to turn the game off. In fact, that like I really have an urge to play this game a lot of the time, which was surprising for me. But yeah, the game is still far from perfect. It's nice to find some enjoyment in this game. I previously called it a dumpster fire, I believe. I don't know if I did that on content, but definitely to my friends, I definitely called it a dumpster fire. But, you know, Starfield is back. It's in my rotation, and, you know, I'm happy to see it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Starfield. Let me know if you are getting back into it, if you've given it a shot since the big update, or if you fell off in September when it came out and never really got back into it. I definitely think it's worth getting back into it and giving it a shot if you did fall off. But that is going to wrap up episode 9 of No Credits Rolled. I want to thank you all so much for listening. Remember, you can always email questions or comments to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. You can call in and leave us a voicemail at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713. And we might just play it on the air. Hey, if you want to call in and complain about Starfield, feel free. Of course, make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcast, we will be there for you. Leave a review, leave a like, leave a comment. Anything like that helps get the show into more people's ears. Also, we are on TikTok at No Credits Rolled. We are also on YouTube Shorts at No Credits Rolled. You can follow us there. I've been trying to get more into TikTok. I really enjoy posting on there and editing videos for that. So I'll do a little quick segment from the full show up on TikTok, and sometimes I'll do additional content there as well. So go follow us at No Credits Rolled on TikTok. There's also a Patreon you can subscribe to as well. Can't leave that out. Oh, I also want to tease next week's episode. Next week, I will be reviewing the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake that just dropped on Switch. I just got that installed the other day, so I will be talking about that next week for review. So make sure to tune in if you want to hear my thoughts on Paper Mario. And with that, I will see you next time on No Credits Rolled.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Your hosts, Joseph and Michelle Whalen, a husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics, are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Insights into Entertainment, episode 152, Gaming's Best and Bleakest of 2023. That's right, if I'm hosting, that means it's an episode about gaming. I am your host, Sam Whalen, and the guy that I just keep dragging into the river of gaming news, my co-host, Joseph Whalen. How's it going?
Hey, and if you're hosting as well, it means we're going to get into some negative stuff at the end of the show, too.
That's right.
That's our MO.
Yeah, we're going to start off positive, though. So today we're doing, like I said, another gaming episode. We're going to talk about the Game Awards. The nominations are out. The actual ceremonies are on December the 7th, so right around the corner. But yeah, we're going to cover some of the nominations, and then we're going to get into some bummer stuff. Because while it has been one of the best years for gaming, it has been one of the worst years for gaming industry layoffs. So we're going to get into some of the hardest hit companies from that, and who should be held accountable for these layoffs, and if there's a way to prevent them. But before we get into that, we have to plug all of our subscriptions, or we need you to subscribe. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast. Is Stitcher still around? Last time I did this,
I think they are gone now.
Yeah, well, if you're still on Stitcher, find a way to subscribe to us. We'd appreciate it. iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Amazon, and Pandora. Everyone loves Pandora.
Yeah.
Shout out Pandora. I forgot about that. Of course, you can always contact us as well if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We are on X at insights_things. I got it.
Yeah, it was limited in what my options were. Okay.
They were maybe already taken. Facebook, you can search Insights Into Things. Instagram, Insights Into Things. Anywhere, just search it. It'll come up. And of course, all these links can be found on our website, www.insightsintothings.com. Let's get right into it.
All right.
All right, so we're going to talk about the Game Award nominations. And I know what you're thinking. Do you want to start with some smaller stuff? No, we're going to start with the big one because that's what everybody's here for. All right, we're going to start with.
Are we planning on talking about anything other than the big one?
Yeah, we got a couple other things in there. There's one other smaller category that I want to talk about just because there's controversy. And who doesn't love controversy? But yeah, we're going to talk about the Game of the Year nominations. We've got 6 nominations for you. So let's take a look at them. And we've got them up on your screen for your viewing pleasure. We've got first one up is we're going to go from right to left, I guess.
Yeah, it's in a different order than the script. Sorry.
We've got Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. This is, of course, published by Nintendo and EPD. What's that?
I don't know.
Nintendo.
Yeah.
Oh, Nintendo EPD. I guess it's like a subdivision.
Entertainment something.
Sure. Yeah. So Tears of the Kingdom has been highly praised for its improvements over Breath of the Wild, offering an expanded world and features that encourage exploration.
Maybe it should be EGP.
For what?
Epic Games Publishing.
Well, Epic Games doesn't publish Breath of the Wild.
Oh, I'm looking at Alan Wake. I'm sorry.
We'll get to that in a second.
I'm jumping ahead.
I wonder, now I got to know what Nintendo EPD stands for. Someone send us an email. Chat, if you're listening, tell us what Nintendo EPD stands for. Anyway, it's a blend of traditional Zelda elements with innovative mechanics, makes it stand out in the series. Everybody loves Zelda, right? I mean, it's always going to get nominated. Breath of the Wild received similar praise, but we were talking off air before the show. You said you're not really in on Nintendo anymore like you used to be.
I'm not. I haven't been a Nintendo person for probably 15 years now. Nintendo to me was just always a little too kid-like, and that's exactly what they go for. So it's not a knock against them, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean there are games like Zelda and Mario that I think while they are they look kind of kiddie. I do think they can appeal to everybody. And I wasn't a big Breath of the Wild fan. I don't even think I finished it, and I haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom yet either. But I'm enjoying it much more than I enjoyed Breath of the Wild. I just think it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's one of those games where they just drop you into the world and they give you a set of tools and they just say go.
Yeah, I mean, they do a fantastic job on their games. It's just, it doesn't appeal to me. There's an audience that it appeals to, and for that, they love it.
Yeah, and again, Nintendo getting a lot of love. 2 nominations from Nintendo this year. But yeah, I mean, what is there to say? It's Zelda. If you like Breath of the Wild, you're going to like Tears of the Kingdom. A lot of people, it is their front runner for winning this. A lot of people think it's going to go to Tears of the Kingdom. I don't personally. There's one.
Neither do I.
Yeah, you'll see where our biases lie coming up shortly. But yeah, that's Tears of the Kingdom. Moving on to nomination number 2, we've got Marvel Spider-Man 2. This is published by Insomniac Games. Insomniac, probably my second favorite PlayStation acquired studio, behind Sony Santa Monica, who of course did God of War, the new God of War games. Insomniac,
Yes.
just incredible. Banger after banger games. Ratchet and Clank, Spider-Man 1, others that I'm not remembering. There was I think they did Sunset Overdrive, which was before they got bought by PlayStation. Sunset Overdrive, great game. You should all check it out. But yeah, Marvel Spider-Man 2 stands out for its dual character gameplay, innovative combat and traversal mechanics, and an expansive narrative that enriches the Spider-Man universe. I'm probably about 3/4 of the way through this. I've been trying to take my time with it because I do love these games, and I don't want to gorge myself on it. I like to take my time when it comes to these things. But I didn't finish it for the show, so what are you going to do? But you haven't started at all, right? But you played the first one.
I haven't started it yet. What are your thoughts on it so far? How similar is it to the first? What's the storyline look like? Obviously, the graphics and everything are fantastic.
Oh, yeah. It looks even better somehow because now we're fully with the power of the PS5. Oh, we didn't show it, but it was the power of the PS5. It looks incredible. It is more Spider-Man, though. I mean, a lot like what we said with Tears of the Kingdom. It's more of the same. But for me, that's a good thing. I love Spider-Man, the initial one, the first one for PS4. I loved Miles Morales. Did you play that spin-off?
I did. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, it's more of that. But they find ways to innovate on it and make it more fun. There's new traversal mechanics. You've got the web wings. There's a lot more. You feel faster. There's like these big.
Having the PS5 helps with that.
Yeah, the one thing, and I don't know if I told you about this. As I was playing it, but the fast travel is like incredible. So the fast travel, you zoom out to the world map, you click a point, and it's instant. Like it just zooms into the map, and you're just there.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it. Like it's remarkable to see in action. And yeah, they've added more because the map is larger as well. So they've added a couple more boroughs in New York, like Queens and stuff, and more suburban areas. I forget the name of it because I'm not from New York, but more suburban areas. But
so what can you tell us about the story without giving away any spoilers?
Yeah. I mean, if you've seen any of the trailers, you know we're dealing with the symbiote. We're dealing with Venom. And honestly, you can probably guess where the story's going to go because it's the same usually every time when Spider-Man deals with, if you've seen the Sam Raimi movies, it's a similar story. And honestly, so far, nothing has really surprised me with the story. I've pretty much been able to guess every beat. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because these, you still love these characters. You've got Peter Parker and Miles Morales now, which is really, really neat. Being able to switch between those two at will. And the really cool thing is like in story missions when you're switching between them on the fly. It's scripted in missions, but it's still really incredible to see it happen. It reminds me of Grand Theft Auto 5 doing the same thing, switching in in game. But yeah, I mean it's the story. There really isn't anything to spoil, honestly, not yet anyway. I mean, I'm sure some stuff will happen because I haven't finished it yet. But if you've seen a Spider-Man symbiote suit story, it's pretty similar.
So is this your pick?
No, my pick is your pick.
Okay.
Which we'll get to shortly. But that is Spider-Man 2. Now, this next one, I have probably the least amount of information on, personal experience as well. It's Alan Wake 2, published by Remedy Entertainment and Epic Games as well. Funny thing about this, there's no digital or physical versions. It's all digital. So, fun fact.
I think it's just a sign of the times.
Yeah, well, especially with it being published by Epic, they want everyone to go through their storefront. But yeah, Alan Wake 2 is noted for its shift towards a more intense survival horror, which you can see in the footage we're showing. It's very scary. Combined with its intriguing narrative and innovative gameplay mechanics. So yeah, again, off air, we were talking about this, and I mentioned how they work in real footage, and I'm curious if we'll see it in these trailers. But the use of the blending of real footage and gameplay is really, really neat. And I would play it, but I'm a coward and I don't want to get scared. So, but you don't have to play the first Alan Wake to know what's going on. It helps. And this game is also part of like the Remedy universe. Remedy also published a game called Control, which I think was up for Game of the Year 2-3 years ago, something like that.
Okay.
But it's like a connected universe now. So they're bringing the stuff from Control in, they're bringing the stuff from the first Alan Wake in, and they're bringing in some stuff from Max Payne, kind of.
Wow, really?
Well, yeah, because like they say that that's not part of the Remedy verse because they didn't like necessarily own it at the time. Like I think they published 1 and 2, but then 3 was through Rockstar, I think. But there's a character in Alan Wake 2 who is, for these you can follow this logic here, he's voiced by the voice actor for Max Payne. I forget the guy's name, but the mocap is Sam Lake, the head of Remedy. He's like the figurehead. Sam Lake did the mocap for Max Payne 1 and 2. So when you think of what Max Payne looks like, he looks like Sam Lake, but he's voiced by a different guy. In Alan Wake 2, it's Sam Lake, but it's not his voice. It's really weird. But that sums up Alan Wake 2. It's a weird game. It looks very artsy. I probably will play it one day. From what I've heard, it's incredible. It's really doing a lot for the genre, not the genre, the medium,
right,
pushing things forward and doing all kinds of stuff that hasn't really ever been seen before, and that's exactly what Remedy's best at. Do you have any interest in Alan Wake 2?
Not really. Haven't played anything in the series yet. I'm not into the scare type things. I don't like the dark type games. Yeah. I like the types of games that I can sit down, get immersed in, play through a story when I have the time. And I get obsessed with games like that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'll play is, if I just have 15, 20 minutes and I just want some mindless distraction, it's, fire up the Xbox, play a shooter, play a sports game, something like that.
Yeah, that's the thing with Alan Wake 2 and with Control as well. You do get immersed. You kind of have to get immersed because there's so much going on. And that's another reason I haven't played it yet, because if it's going to be scary and I have to pay attention, it's like I just can't do it. Because scary, I'll be honest, folks, when I play a scary game, volume's all the way down, lights are on, I'm usually watching something else. Like I'm not listening, right? Because it's the audio that gets me. I can probably do with the visuals. But I'm going to have to pay attention to Alan Wake, and I'm going to be terrified the whole time. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if it's nominated for other stuff. It probably is. I don't think it's gonna win. I think it's probably towards the bottom tier for what people are guessing is gonna win.
Right.
But now we move on to our totally biased pick. Next up is Baldur's Gate 3, published by Larian Studios. The game has received critical acclaim for its gameplay narrative and production quality. It's already won multiple awards, recently cleaned up at the Golden Joystick Awards. Its deep integration of D&D mechanics, it's Dungeons & Dragons for you normies out there, combined with a rich narrative and flexible gameplay, which is probably my favorite part about it, makes it a standout in the role-playing game genre. It's revolutionary, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I've never played, well, that's not true. I have played something like it, and it was the last game published by Larian Studios, Divinity 2 Original Sin, which I was trying to get everybody to play, but, it was a little, it wasn't as accessible as Baldur's Gate 3. And, this game has taken everybody by storm. Everybody's talking about it. You have like 500 hours in it.
Yeah, I have an unhealthy amount of time into this game for some reason. It really is a remarkable game. It to me, it's a genre defining game.
Yep.
And you look at the images of it, and the playthrough's great. The graphics are wonderful. If you're okay with turn-based combat, it's a great thing. But it captures the mechanics of a tabletop D&D game, which is very difficult to do. And the variance of the game. I've done 2 full playthroughs now and I have 5 short starts through Act 3. And I've yet to have the same thing happen twice in any story section.
Wow.
It's amazing that the game itself is that adaptive, and your choices matter. A lot of game systems tell you your choices matter, right? Well, normally it matters as to what your next cutscene is.
Mhm.
This is something, and Larian's known for this, where your choices don't matter, but your choices have consequences.
Yep.
And you may make a choice in Act 1 that 30 hours later in Act 3 comes back and has a completely different effect on how the game goes, how people treat you, how the story goes. To sit down and to even come up with a mind map of how these different storylines go blows my mind.
I don't know how they did it.
Like, people are afraid of AI taking over the world. Whatever this game engine uses to come up with its story is more dangerous, I think, and more intelligent than any AI out there.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There's really not much else to say. It's incredible. And in that description we read off, I think the flexible gameplay is really my favorite aspect of it. It feels like D&D. You know, I love Dungeons and Dragons, and this is as close as you can get. And in some ways, I think it's better than actually playing D&D, because I think it onboards everything so much simpler, right? At least on console, you know, your actions and everything you can do. When I'm playing D&D in real life, and I've got, even using the app or pen and paper, you kind of forget a lot of stuff you can do because there's so much information. But I think what Baldur's Gate 3 does so well is streamline that and make it so you really are considering everything you can do, even if it's just like shoving somebody off a cliff, which is like, you know, you can end a boss fight by doing that if you pass the check. And it's like D&D in that regard, where a DM could spend 3 hours planning a boss encounter, and you walk up and you pass the first persuasion check and the fight's over. You don't even have to fight the guy.
I know that feeling.
But like, I don't know how to describe it. I think it's a game that everyone can play. Like, it is a little bit complicated, and it's definitely, you can tell it was meant for PC first.
Sure.
But I think they did a great job making it for console too. Like, I think it still works.
Well, and that's the one thing that's worth mentioning on PC is it was built for PC. And in fact, you have a completely different interface on PC. But if you fire up a game controller on the PC, it changes that game interface so it looks just like the console. So it's completely, that's another thing, that the fact that they went through and made 2 completely separate interfaces for how you were going to interact with the game, just that level of forethought was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you know, you and I both play D&D. We both DM from time to time. This has changed the way that I play D&D.
Yep.
It's educated me on different character class information, all that stuff. But the fact that it shows you, you know, you could sit down at a tabletop and roll dice and throw a fireball at somebody, and it kind of just rolls off your tongue and you move on to the next thing. You don't know what it looks like. And in here, not only do they visualize what spellcasting and combat looks like, they show it in different ways for different classes, you know. And even, you know, if you go with a bard, the bard can cast, you know, any number of spells, but depending on the instrument that the bard is using, the visualization looks different and is custom to the instrument, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
It adds so much ambiance and so much life to the game. That's why I think this one should win.
Oh yeah.
Even if it doesn't.
Yeah, spoilers, folks. I don't think it's gonna. It's nominated for 8 things. First of all, I do not think it's gonna sweep. I think it will get most of them. But like, it's up for like multiplayer game. I don't think it's gonna win that.
And the multiplayer aspect is terrible.
It's not great. I like that it's in there, and I want to do a playthrough with my friends whenever they get it.
Well, the multiplayer. All right, so multiplayer, in as much as
multiple players,
4 people can be in the game.
Yeah, there are multiple players,
but they're all playing their own story essentially, and you can interact with their story to a certain amount. There's no instancing that happens here, right? So you don't have a shared experience. You go off and you have dialogue on your own that's relevant to your character, and you can share that with other people, but they can't participate in it.
Right.
It's not an MMO. It's a kind of a cooperative play through that you do, most of the time,
Mhm.
right? It's not even all the time. So it's not really a good multiplayer game. It's a great single player game that has some multiplayer capability.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that does shine in the multiplayer is the combat. I think because we played it very briefly, and that's the only experience I've had with the multiplayer was the hour that we probably played.
Right.
So I can't speak to it fully, but the combat in multiplayer is great because the combat is normally turn-based, and it still is in multiplayer, but it syncs up whoever the real players are. So if you and I were playing, our turns would happen simultaneously, but everything else is still turn-based.
Yeah.
So you can sync up abilities. There is a lot of potential there. We just didn't play enough of it to find out.
Well, and the one thing I will say that was great in multiplayer is as you play through your character's turn, you end your turn. In single player, if you end your turn prematurely, it's over.
Yep.
In multiplayer, if you end your turn, you have to confirm that you're ending it. That safety feature needs to be worked into the single player.
It is.
It is now?
You can, yeah, I
Okay.
turned it on because I kept accidentally ending my turn. You can toggle it so you have to hold triangle to end your
Okay.
turn.
At launch, that wasn't
Oh,
there.
really?
Yeah.
Because I would end my turn accidentally all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's got to be a setting for
All right.
this.
I have to go turn that all in the
it's
game now.
much better because there's been so many times where I've done it accidentally and like haven't even done an action. And then, I get beat up because I didn't do anything.
Right. The one thing I didn't like about the multiplayer, though, is as you go play through the game, you pick up companions.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the rule is whoever talks to the companion gets them. And I can't hand that companion off to you so you can go do something else while I go do something else.
Especially when cutscenes can be triggered just by walking.
Proximity.
Yeah. So that's a little weird. But everything else is great.
Yeah.
I think I just get unlucky when it comes to these things, and I usually have technical bugs when other people don't. I have had some bugs with it, but considering everything that's going on, it's like a miracle. It's like it's from like on high. It was sent down, and it runs and it works. And if you think you can do something, you probably can. You feel so free, and I've never really played another game like that where there really are no. I mean, there are constraints, right? In terms of like you can't like clip through a wall or something,
Right.
But like. I've never played another game where I go into a situation and I feel like I could handle it in almost infinite ways.
It's a game that is sophisticated well beyond its years.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't expect something with this level of intelligence to come out for 5 to 6 years.
Yep. We could probably do a whole episode on it, but we
Yeah.
do have some other nominations to talk about.
We got 2 more to go through. Let's get rid of the rest of these.
So next up is Resident Evil 4, published by Capcom. This game is awesome. I played this game. I never played the original Resident Evil, so I was able to play this. This game rocks. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. It's like if you played through an action movie, like an 80s action movie. And it is scary. There were some parts where the volume had to go down and the lights had to come on. But overall, you have like a million guns. So you feel like you're in control. It's less of you're running from the monster, more like you're running to the monster to shoot it. Some highlights. This remake of the classic game has been praised for its impressive graphics, audio, and revamped gameplay mechanics, while retaining the core mechanics of the original and introducing new features and expanded content. Like I said, I never played the original, so I can't really speak to that. But I've played this game and finished it, and I absolutely loved it. I'm glad it got a nomination. I know some people are maybe a little bit perturbed by that because it's a remake, but if you play the game, it really is a remake. It is different from the original, and from what I've seen, it is its own game, and it stands on its own. I really think it does, and I highly recommend it if you like action games, because it is more of an action game than it is a survival horror game. And if you like 80s movies, because it feels like that.
There you go.
Have you played any Resident Evil?
I played Resident Evil a long time ago on like a PS2 when it first came out, or if it goes back that far. Again, I don't like dark games.
Yeah.
So
That's Resident Evil.
Right. It's not one that I've ever really jumped on.
Yeah. In terms of where I think it ranks in terms of potential to win, I think it's probably towards the top. But I just, after talking about Baldur's Gate, I don't see how anything could beat that. we've got a little guest in the studio. A little lanternfly just flew in. Resident Evil 4. And our final one here is Super Mario Wonder, published as well by Nintendo. I own this game, but I have yet to play it because I'm lending it to my girlfriend. But it looks cool. It looks cool.
The sacrifices we must make.
I know. Highlights. This game is celebrated for its control mechanics, animation, expressive characters, innovative level design, and dynamic audio. Is it? All right. Dynamic audio. I guess. It features new power-ups and a fresh visual design that breaks from the traditional Mario aesthetic. And that's really, so many people for years were asking for these 2D Mario games to get a visual not upgrade, but a visual change. And that's what we got in this game. I mean, this doesn't look like other Mario games, which is, I think, a big reason why it's such a standout. I'm looking forward to it. Game of the year, I don't know. This was a surprise for me, but I think it's because it's Mario and it's Nintendo, and I think there's just a level of industry praise that comes with that.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong with this looks suspiciously like a standard Mario platformer.
Well, yeah.
With really nice graphics.
It does look very pretty. They added a bunch of new power-ups and stuff. From what I've heard that from people that have played it, it's not as... it didn't break the mold as much as people wanted it to. I think a lot of people were just hungry for a, just full send it, just do something different. Oh, he's on me now. I flicked him.
Now he's knocked out somewhere.
Sorry about that. But yeah, I think it wasn't quite the property shakeup people were looking for.
Well, I think it's funny that there was criticism leveled at Resident Evil for being a remake. How is this not a remake?
Well, it's not all the levels are unique. You'll probably still get the Mario 1-1 world that has every Mario game, but all the levels are new. All the content is new. That trailer did not really do it justice, I don't think.
It didn't impress me, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. If there was one that I could be okay cutting from these nominations, it would probably be this. But again, I haven't played it. Maybe when I play it, I'll change my mind. But
fair enough.
So those are your Game of the Year nominations. Tell us what you think should win in the comments down below. I think our vote is soundly Baldur's Gate.
Absolutely.
We have some other quick things I want to round up here in this section because we've gone kind of long. It has been a banner year for gaming. A couple nominations games I would like to highlight that didn't make Game of the Year nominations. Sea of Stars, highly recommend that if you like RPGs, that pixel style. That game is incredible. It's fantastic. Final Fantasy 16, Armored Core 6. These are all nominated in other categories, not Game of the Year. Starfield. Remember Starfield, everybody?
I have heard rumors of Starfield.
It's bad. I don't like it. I'll say it.
I heard it's got a really good engine for building Starship.
Yeah, I haven't done any of that.
That's what everyone seems to love about the game.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I think since it's come out, it was praised pretty highly on release, but I think as people have been able to sit with it, I think it's somewhere in the middle of the pack, which is a disappointment, especially if you're an Xbox fan, because that was
supposed to be their game winner.
That was supposed to be their game winner, and it's nominated for one category, and it's probably not going to win.
What's that, for biggest game of the year?
RPG, I think, is what it's up for. But Baldur's Gate's in that category, so it's not going to win. So Jeff Keighley, the guy that runs it, he's like the brains behind the operation. He said that even though, it's a great year for gaming, we did have to limit it to 6. Let's see. Do we want to cover these other categories, or are we short on time?
You can run through them real quick.
So we got these are some that I just wanted to highlight. Best performance, we have Ben Starr for Final Fantasy 16, Cameron Monaghan for Jedi Survivor. Have you played that yet?
No.
Yeah, he does a good job. It's fine.
I didn't really like the first ones.
Oh, that's right. You didn't. We've talked about that before. Idris Elba for Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty, which...
What was that, an add-on for Cyberpunk?
Yes.
Really?
But it's also like a remake, kind of, because with Phantom Liberty came the Cyberpunk 2.0 update, which like changed the whole game and made it what it should have been at launch, which is impressive and deserves acclaim, but...
Not that steaming pile of crap that we got at launch.
I love Cyberpunk since day one. I
love driving around a city and seeing random piles of trash just fall from the sky. It was such a just delightful thing.
I've been a Cyberpunk diehard supporter since day one. not a CD Projekt Red supporter because they lied a lot, but I don't know. People are saying it's back, and it's kind of wild that Idris Elba is in the game.
That is kind of, well, that's the thing. If you have a terrible release for a game, sign a celebrity to the next version of the game.
I own this DLC, but I have yet to play it because when I was playing Cyberpunk, I'm playing through it to experience the 2.0 stuff, which is very impressive, and I highly recommend going back to it if you want. You can drive around the city.
Is it another 15 terabytes of a download?
Probably.
It took 3 days to download it.
I'm going to butcher this woman's name, but Melanie LeBird.
Sure, that looks good.
From Alan Wake 2. She plays, I think her name's Saga in it. She's the other main character that isn't Alan Wake. Neil Newbon, who is Asterion, right? In Baldur's Gate 3. People love that guy. He didn't survive in my playthrough very long.
Didn't survive in mine either.
So, but I know he's captured the internet's.
Turns out a stake through the heart really does kill a vampire.
Yeah, I pretty much instantly killed him. I think he's one of the front runners, and then my boy Yuri Lowenthal for Marvel Spider-Man 2. He is the best, and I hope he wins. But that's who I'm pulling for. I love Yuri. He kind of does the same voice all the time, but man, is it good.
He's like the Nicolas Cage of voiceover.
So we'll see who wins that. Really quickly, best independent game. I just wanted to cover this because this is where the controversy is. Defined as for outstanding creative and technical achievement in a game made outside the traditional publisher system. Remember that. It's going to be important. So we've got Cocoon. Haven't played it. Want to. Viewfinder is really, really interesting. The concept of that game is, are you able to pull footage really quick for it if you can? Maybe?
I can try.
Because you got to see it. You have a camera, and when you take photos, you can then go into the photo, and it changes the layout of the level. And it's tough to describe, but once you see it, it will like blow your mind. So yeah, we're pulling up a trailer real quick. I played the demo for this. I haven't played the full game, but it is it's really, really remarkable. And again, it's one of those games where you wonder how it even runs. So yeah, here, check this out. So he just takes the picture
for our viewing audience.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, audio listeners. Look up a trailer of Viewfinder. It's very cool. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is one of the reasons why the indie category is
this looks
so
like
important.
Something that should be in my Oculus Quest.
Yeah, like it's incredible how this like works. And like I said, it's hard to describe for audio listeners, but go check it out. And I think the demo is still available. And you'll pretty much get the gist of it. But yeah, it's one of those games where it's like, how is this even running? And how does this even work? So yeah, that's Viewfinder. Sea of Stars is also up for the indie category. I love that game. That probably is in my top 5 for game of the year, for my personal game of the year. It's incredible. Dredge, which I think is a spooky game. And then Dave the Diver, which I love. Dave the Diver, also a great game. Is it an indie game, though, is what people are wondering. Because Dave the Diver is developed by Mint Rocket, which is a small team. But Mint Rocket is owned by Nexon, which is a multi-billion-dollar gaming company. So people are wondering...
That sounds like the evil corporation from a Bond movie or something.
Yeah, it sounds like from RoboCop. So yeah, unfortunately, Dave the Diver is getting a lot of heat because of this. And the team at Mint Romney, that's what I think I'm going to say. It is a small team, but they're getting all this heat because is it really an indie game? I don't know. What do you think? Because they had effectively a blank check to make this.
Well, and that's the thing is that you can have a small team, but when you're getting backed by a large corporation like that, and you've got the budget for it,
right,
and you don't have the pressures of being that struggling indie developer trying to find an outlet for it and someone to push it and market it, I think you very quickly get outside of that indie game realm.
Yeah, and you know, I still highly recommend you go play Dave the Diver. It's you run a sushi bar, you're exploring, you're a diver. I don't know, it's hard to describe.
That sounds exciting.
It's very exciting. I would make you pull up the trailer, but that was really hard to do for the other game. So, but yeah, Dave the Diver is great, but I don't think it should be in the indie category. That being said, you should still go play it.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably it for this segment.
Yeah, I think we got everything we could out of that. Go play Baldur's Gate 3. When we come back, we're going to get into the bummer part of the show where we talk about industry layoffs. We'll be right back.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Insights into Entertainment. Today we're talking gaming. We just got done covering the Game Award nominations, and now we're going to talk about industry layoffs.
Of course we're talking gaming because you're on the show.
That's right. I should wear like a gamer sweater or
Should
something.
be Insights into Gaming when you're on.
Yeah, have like Mountain Dew in the intro. All right. So anyway, like I said at the top of the show, despite being lauded as one of the best years in gaming, the industry has been hit by massive layoffs at every level. At the time of writing, it's probably higher now. Around 6,000 people have been laid off in the gaming industry. There's a very helpful but depressing website called videogamelayoffs.com, and it's been tracking the numbers since the beginning of the year. It's just one of those stories you hear about every week if you're not covering, I'm not covering anything, I'm not a journalist, but if you're following gaming news, it's one of those things that you can't really ignore, especially this year. And you know, I don't know anything about economics, but I feel like it's one of those things where when one company does it, there's a real chance of it starting a tidal wave of this, where it's like it doesn't make it okay, but from the company's point of view, it might have like, well, if everyone's doing it, we might as well just do it now to cut costs. What do you think?
Well, and I think what you run into really is when one company does it, there's a viable reason for doing it, and usually it's an economic reason,
Yeah.
or you know, it could be depending on what the industry, but we've seen layoffs across the board, regardless of industry, not just video games, and companies that are doing perfectly fine, companies that are doing record numbers, record profits are laying people off. The unfortunate reality is that record profits, in order to get record profits, you either have to bring in more income, bring in more revenue, increase your margin on what it's costing you to do things. And to do that, you cut costs, you cut labor.
Yeah.
And that's usually the first thing people cut. And when you've got games that are releasing and you don't have another game in the pipeline that requires that level of labor commitment, that's the first thing that gets cut when it comes to the software industry.
Yeah, and we're going to have a segment coming up where we get into more the nitty gritty on why these layoffs happen. But I just wanted to highlight some of the big examples of these layoffs. One of which is at Unity, the software developers. They let go around 900 people this year alone. Unity has been in some very, very hot water lately. I don't know if you've been following any of this. They changed its pricing structure this year and basically nuked their whole brand for no reason. Not for no reason. They wanted to make more money. But like, it was crazy.
So explain what Unity is and what their product is.
So Unity is an engine, right?
Yeah, it's a game engine.
Yeah, that you can develop your game using Unity.
So a lot of the popular games that are out today are built on this game engine.
Right.
And when a game developer uses this engine, they pay a licensing fee to Unity to use it. So for every copy of the game that's sold, a percentage of that revenue goes to Unity for their royalties for that. And that's what they overhauled.
Right. So this is from The Verge. Unity they said that beginning next year, they would implement a pay per download pricing scheme that would charge developers a flat fee anytime a game using Unity software is installed. I think the keyword there is installed.
Yes.
Right? Because
you can't do demos at that point in time without paying Unity.
Right. And that is including installs that may not be legal
Right.
through pirating and things like that. Also, multiple installations of a game, like if you uninstall it and reinstall it.
Well, because what happens is every time you install a game, the Unity engine reaches out to the licensing server. So if you do demos of the game, if you have pirated downloads of the game, if you uninstall it and reinstall it, every time it goes out and hits that licensing server to confirm that it's a valid license, as opposed to what it was before was on sales. So every time you would sell the game, that would then go towards the licensing.
This is more from The Verge. The fees are further broken down depending on where a game is purchased, meaning that a game bought in the US, UK, and other standard markets is assessed a higher fee than when it's bought in emerging markets like India or China. So, like, I don't know what they were thinking when they did this. This made a ton of people angry. Many developers, publishers, and consumers completely disavowed Unity. People wanted to boycott the game, or the engine itself. And you got to understand, Unity is like the number one. It's like Unity and Unreal are like the two engines that pretty much everyone uses for any kind of game development. I mean, Unity has tried to walk some of this stuff back, but I think a lot of the damage might already have been done. What do you think?
Well, and the thing is, the regional pricing that they're talking about is not unusual in any other industry. So in any other industry, talking manufacturing, for instance, you have tariffs on purchased goods. So, for instance, I have a friend of mine who lives down in Peru. For him to buy a graphics card that costs $2,000 up here, he's got to pay $3,000 for it because of the tariffs. So Unity's logic is, well, if there's regional pricing based on tariffs because of purchased goods, then we can do the same thing for licensing. Well, the problem you run into is they're the first ones that are doing this.
Yeah.
Nobody else does this because there's no tariff on licensing. There's a tariff on imports when you're talking about actual manufactured goods. So there's no impetus whatsoever for their reasoning behind what they're doing. That's why they're taking the heat for it. And as a result, they're losing a boatload of business in the process.
And that results in 900 people losing their jobs.
Exactly.
And, you know, should the CEO maybe have taken a pay cut instead of having to fire all these people? Maybe.
That's a very controversial philosophy. A lot of rank and file workers have.
Yeah. Another company that I want to highlight is Embracer Group. They've been making all kinds of news in the last couple of years. They've been snatching up a lot of studios like Gearbox, who made Borderlands, and Crystal Dynamics, who you guys will probably know if you've played the new Lara Croft games. Embracer Group is sort of this conglomerate that's just been eating up studios.
Kind of like EA and all the other conglomerates out there.
Yeah. Except they're not doing it very well. They're now cleaning house. This is from IGN's Wesley Yin-Poole. Embracer Group has said it has laid off 904 people. That's about 5% of its workforce. It's since its financial struggles beginning following the collapse of the $2 billion deal, reportedly with the Saudi government, funded company Savvy Games Groups. When this deal didn't go through, this was like insane because it like fell apart like the day before it was going to happen. And like the industry was like, what's going to happen now?
Right.
Turns out a bunch of people are going to get laid off. In a recent statement, Embracer said they wanted to become a, quote, stronger company, I guess. Another they're closing whole studios too that they own now. So Volition, who developed the Saints Row games, they got another stab at Saints Row and it failed critically and commercially. They shut the studio down. So yeah, Embracer is kind of just cutting swaths from their company now. And a lot of it has to do with that $2 billion deal that fell through.
And this is typical, corporate mentality is that they're interested in the bottom line.
Right.
And anytime you have a publicly traded company that has a board of directors and it has, stock owners, your fiduciary duty is to the stockholders. And you trust the people that are making these decisions who aren't always they're business people, but they're not necessarily software or game industry people. And that's sort of where you get that dirty corporate feeling that people tend to get here, is that they're just looking at the bottom line and they're going to cut their losses. They're going to cut what they think are losses in order to make money. And it's not just software. Bob Iger's doing the same thing at Disney and killing Disney. You've got industries across the board that are doing this type of stuff. They see something that's not raking in money. They have a certain margin that they want to meet. And if you're not meeting that margin, then you're a casualty. ignoring the fact that a lot of times the game industry doesn't work the same way these other manufacturing or entertainment industries work. The return on investment tends to be a much longer timeline that the corporate world and the stock world does not want to wait for.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of giant corporate companies, Amazon Games also had some layoffs. They recently cut 180 jobs from their games department. This comes during the largest sweep of layoffs at Amazon as a whole. We were talking about, industry-wide stuff, with nearly 27,000 jobs being cut in the last year. Now, we're talking about 6,000 layoffs in the gaming industry alone, 27,000 just from Amazon, just to put things in perspective.
But that's across the board in Amazon. That's
right.
Sales, manufacturing, warehousing, everything. And a lot of that for Amazon is not because they're losing money, because they're not.
No, we actually have record profits.
Right. A lot of that has to do with improvements in how their processes work. A lot of automation going in place. They've roboticized a number of their plants. So they've negated the need to have physical labor here. And you'll notice only 180 of those 27,000 jobs were in the game industry.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people they had in their game studios to begin with, though.
Right. Yeah. So Amazon's revenue is up 13%. Probably helped cutting 27,000 people that you don't have to pay anymore.
Looks good at the bottom line.
Yeah. Net income tripled to $9.9 billion. That's from CNBC's Ashley Kaput. That's a funny name. Sorry, Ashley. But yeah, so profits are up. And like you said, when the bottom line comes up, it's capitalism, baby. That's the way the news goes.
So despite the game industry experiencing one of its best years, over 6,000 people face layoffs. How do you think these job losses at various levels are impacting the industry's morale and future prospects, especially in light of such a successful game release year?
I follow a lot of people that are in game development on Twitter and stuff, and I listen to a lot of gaming podcasts of people that are very close to people in the industry. It sucks. Turns out layoffs suck. I think it's really, really bad for morale. Because, I think a lot of people they grind and try to get into the industry only for them to have a very high rate of getting laid off anyway. Especially when, like we talked about before, when a game ships, what happens now? And yeah, it's a great year for gaming, but it's tough to ignore all these layoffs. And if you were going into this industry, you're going to have to wonder, am I going to be the next one to get laid off if I even can get a job in the first place?
Yeah, it's when you see this type of thing happen across the board, it's tough when it's your own company and they're doing layoffs. My company did layoffs this year too, and
so did mine.
And it has an effect on morale, and it has an effect on the output. And I think a lot of time the corporate entities that make these decisions never really go out and do a proper impact analysis to see what level of productivity is going to be affected by people with decreased morale, because the idea is, if they don't perform, we'll just lay them off. Well, when people walk out the door, it's not a salary and benefits that's walking out the door that you can save money on. There's brain drain. There's tribal knowledge that walks out that door that as a result, the people that are remaining, because the job still has to get done, and the people that are left to do that job are struggling now to do that job. So either it takes longer, the quality drops off, the volume drops off. And I think when corporate entities make these decisions, they don't always take that impact analysis into account.
Yeah, and speaking of quality, you just triggered something in my mind. This is a very small facet of this whole thing, but one of the sections that gets laid off a lot is quality testers. So that reflects in your game when your game doesn't work because you fired everybody that was going to test it. So I know EA fired a bunch of them lately. I think but again, it's one of those things where when your game's no longer in development, you have no need for these quality testers. But with games like Apex Legends, games that are live as a service that are continuously going in development, where do quality testers fall in that?
Well, and that's the thing. Having worked in the software industry for years, your ratio of testers to developers is usually 2 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And testing is always seen as the first area that gets cut.
Yep.
But what they don't realize is that you can't trust a developer to test their own code. They're too close to it.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a look at Larian Studios, right? So Larian Studios did their official release in October of Baldur's Gate 3. They've had 10 patches and 10 bug fix patches they put out, emergency bug fixes, and 3 or 4 major patch releases in that time. So the development doesn't stop when it goes out the door because it's never a finished product. You've got a lifetime of probably 4 or 5 years that you still have to support the product. So getting rid of the people once the game's out the door is probably short-sighted.
And within those 4 or 5 years, you're probably going to start development on your next game, especially with something like Baldur's Gate 3 that was insanely successful.
And by the time Baldur's Gate 3 comes out, by the time your premier game comes out, you've already got a pipeline that's full of schedules for what's next in line. And if you don't, then you might as well just shut your doors because given the time frame it takes, where you're looking at 4 or 5 years of development to put a decent game out. So if you don't already have something in the pipeline and something in the works when your current game comes out, you're going to go out of business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, you get this a lot with movies too. You know, these things take so long to make and then it's out and then people immediately want more.
Right.
And I mean, that's just how it goes. But hopefully that keeps some people employed too. Those are our layoff discussion. In our next segment, we're going to talk more about the causes of it. I know you did a lot of research for this, so I'll probably let you take over for it. But yeah, layoffs are bad. Layoffs are bad, and it sucks.
Layoffs are bad. Don't do layoffs.
Layoffs suck if it happens to you. But we'll be right back.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Entertainment, everybody. We're wrapping up the show today talking about the cause and the purpose of all these layoffs. So the trend of layoffs in the video game industry can be attributed to several factors, and understanding this is key to forecasting the trends during and its impact on the industry's future. And we go to our corporate shill, Joseph Whalen, for the layoff report.
Wow.
Why layoffs are a good thing. Go.
No, not why they're a good thing. What causes layoffs? So we already kind of touched on economic fluctuations. So the video game industry is not immune to the broader economic trends in the world. And economic downturns or market uncertainty can lead to budget cuts and staff reductions. And everyone knows where we are with inflation and how tight money is and everything's costing more money. So that's pretty obvious right there. We're also looking right now, and it's first time in the industry's history that we're in a post-pandemic period. So we're still looking at adjustments from that. COVID-19 pandemic led to a surge in gaming as people sought entertainment during the lockdowns. This surge may have led to overhiring or overexpansion in some companies. As the world returns to normalcy, demand may stabilize or decrease, leading to restructuring.
There's also, people now are like, there's the discussion of work from home. Well, why wouldn't I just always work from home if I can? Especially when it comes to game development. A lot of these folks packed up their work computers and brought them home to keep working on games during the pandemic as best they could. So now, there's a discussion of, do we even need to be going back into, in the work? And that's across all industries. If we can, can we just keep the work at home thing going? And then, that's more cost cutting because then you don't have to rent office space.
Absolutely. And a lot of companies are looking at that as a possibility. In fact, behind you is a permanent workstation that's been set up for my wife, Michelle, now, who works from home 2 days a week as a result of that. Yep. And they saw what they can get out of it. So the other thing you look at is shifts in consumer behavior. Changes in gaming trends and consumer preferences can impact revenue streams. Companies may need to restructure to align with these shifts, leading to layoffs in departments that no longer align with new strategies. We also have technological changes. Advancement in technology can render certain skills or positions obsolete. As companies